Hello, and welcome back to Zen and Fanfics. Today we're starting an exciting new series. What if Deku was sent 500 years in past? If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe for more content. The story we're featuring is written by Foolery on fanfiction.net. You can find all the relevant links in the description, so be sure to check out the author's profile and say hello. Now let's dive into the story. Izuku groaned in pain and picked himself up off the ground, dusting some of the rubble from the solid concrete wall that he had been thrown through off his body. Ugh, all right. That's what I get for not paying attention to the heavy hitter. He turned around to face the hole, activating one for all as he did so. Good timing on his part, because as soon as he turned around, the Nomu that he was fighting barreled towards him. It threw a heavy punch forward, but it hit the ground instead, as Izuku jumped out of the way and landed a kick directly to the Nomu's head, using about 45% of his full power. Said Nomu reeled back in pain, and a couple of other figures emerged from the hole in the wall. Nomu, kill that annoying brat. Izuku groaned at the sound of Tamura Shigaraki's voice. You really don't have any better material than that? I'm getting kind of tired of hearing kill that annoying brat all the time, Shigaraki. The blue-haired man growled in annoyance. That mouth of yours never ceases to irritate me, Deku. Two other figures emerged from behind Shigaraki. Izuku recognized one as the psycho blonde, Toga Himiko, who was completely obsessed with him, and the other Izuku hadn't met before. The Nomu threw another punch, which Izuku swiftly dodged and retaliated with one of his own. Oh, a new guy? What's your name? The man stepped forward and clenched his fist. Silence, filthy hero. You can't condescend me. I am called Time Turner. The green-haired hero looked at him in surprise. Oh, do you have some kind of time queer? You know what? Actually, I can ask questions once you guys are arrested. He spun around on the Nomu and powered up an attack to 100%, letting loose a devastating kick to the Nomu and knocking it through the wall. He then sprinted towards Shigaraki and was met midway by Toga, who was wildly swinging her knife at the green-haired hero. Hello, my darling. Izuku groaned and avoided her attacks, but she moved too fast for him to get a good opportunity to retaliate. Can't you take a hint? I'm not into crazy psychos. Her smile widened. Oh, Izuku dear, you're breaking my heart. He grunted and put more power into his movements, getting faster as he did so. Shigaraki noticed this and turned to the man standing at his side. Turner, now would be a good opportunity to take him out. The said villain gazed over to his boss. But Shigaraki, that would take Toga out too. The decay villain grit his teeth. I don't care. I just want that Deku gone. The man frowned but nodded. Very well then. He moved his hands out, and a vortex began to form from his action. It snaked its way over to the fighting pair and began to surround them. By the time Izuku noticed, it was too late, and the dust from the vortex began to cloud his vision. He yelled out, Shigaraki, you won't win this. The man gave a devious grin. Who's going to stop me? The vortex suddenly grew more violent and chaotic, much to the surprise of even its user. Green lightning arced and flashed across the sands, and the winds picked up twofold in speed. Time Turner grunted with strain. Something's going on. His quirk must be interacting with mine. I have to shut it all down, or it could grab us all. Shigaraki spun around. No, it doesn't matter as long as he's gone. The villain grunted, but continued to use his quirk. Inside the vortex, Izuku was struggling to keep his full power under control. It was as if One for All itself was reaching out and intertwining itself with the vortex. Toga had disappeared from his sight, but he noticed that she was able to get a solid cut on his arm. The sand stung the open wound, but he still tried to escape from the vortex. However, with the addition of his own quirk, it was too strong to get through. Shigaraki, with a final yell, he was knocked off his feet and was pulled into the center of the vortex. Soon after, the sand fell to the ground, revealing that neither Izuku nor Toga stood before them. Shigaraki grinned maliciously and began to laugh. Finally, the great hero Deku has fallen by my hand. Time Turner slumped down in exhaustion, and they reveled in their victory. For Izuku, the world was dark. He still felt dizzy, but he could tell that he was no longer spinning. partially because he felt the touch of the cool stone on his skin. He groaned in pain and cracked his eyes open. It was light out, he could tell that much, but luckily he was shaded enough from the light that his eyes adjusted relatively quickly. He was in an alleyway of some sort, but it didn't look like he was anywhere familiar. Shakily rising to his feet, he groaned at the stiffness of his muscles. How long was I out? As he stretched, most of the drowsiness that overtook him washed away, and he noticed that he was in some sort of town. However, looks like that guy really did have some kind of time travel quirk after all. The town was old-looking, at least architecture-wise. There was a huge castle that stood proudly at the center of the town, and several small buildings scattered about its base. People milled about, and he then identified his first problem. He was still in his hero clothes, and all these people were dressed like people from the past, he assumed. He frowned. He got sent pretty far back by the looks of it. Judging by the looks of the town and its people, he'd have to say mid-19th century at most. Almost a 500-year jump from where he was in his time. All right then, first order of business. Get some clothes. He felt horrible for this, but in order to blend in, he'd definitely need to steal. He wouldn't have any money to buy anything, and in order to blend in and acquire currency, he'd have to have clothes. It was a catch-22, but he knew what he had to do. He looked sadly at the clothesline that was hanging just above his head. I'll pay them back someday. He hopped up using one for all and grabbed an outfit and quickly changed. He left the tattered and bloody hero costume behind a large crate and quickly left the alleyway. Changing had brought attention to his problem numero dos. He was hurting. That last fight had been a bit of a doozy. There had to be at least 6 gnomes that he had fought, not including the other villains that were present. He was in pain all over his body, and he had several cuts all over his arms and torso, courtesy of one Toga Himiko. The thought of her halted the green-haired teen in his tracks. Did she follow him here? It was certainly a possibility. He never saw her leave the vortex, and he didn't see her in it either. It was likely that she was sent to the same place he was. Or maybe she hadn't. He wouldn't have any good way of knowing. She could blend in with anyone. She dashed. Hey, kid. You all right? You're mumbling to yourself mighty hard there. Izuku jumped in surprise before blushing. Very sorry. It's just a habit of mine. He bowed in apology, and the man waved him off. Don't worry about it, kid. You wait. Izuku rose his eyebrow and looked at the man in confusion. The man had dropped the thing he was holding and began to back away, his face pale. GGG guards. The man sprinted away, leaving Izuku dumbfounded in the middle of the street. Soon thereafter, several men clad in golden armor came sprinting around the corner. When they spotted him, they pointed their weapons at him. Stop right there, murderer! Izuku paled at the words. Murderer? He'd never kill someone ever. How come? The answer came to him before he could even think about it. Toga. She must have taken his form and been spotted killing someone. He then noticed the wanted posters that were posted all over town, his face evilly grinning at anyone that gazed upon the poster. He turned to the guards and held his hands up in a placating manner. Wait, please. Hear me out. It wasn't me, but I know who it was. A shapeshifter named Dash. Before he could finish, a guard riding a white horse made their way through the crowd. Izuku gulped, as the man was clearly highly decorated. Most likely the captain or some kind of commanding officer. Likely story. Now, you're coming with us, criminal. Some like you belong in the gallows. Izuku paled a bit more, reflexively reaching towards his neck. He regained his composure and sighed. He really shouldn't be making a habit of breaking the law like this. Sorry, gentlemen, but I really can't afford being arrested, especially not with what I know is out there. He activated full cowling and jumped over the guards, soaring through the air and landing on the other side of the formation before breaking out into a full-speed sprint, leaving the guards in the dust. From behind him, he could hear the distant order of "after him." Of course, this only caused him to begin running faster, hopping through the tops of trees and forest as he tried to lose the guards that were on his tail. Seriously, Izuku, this is not how we planned on spending our afternoon. Speaking of planning, maybe if I stop, things will stop happening to ruin my plans. From the shadows, A lone figure watched as the guards ran out of town, following the green hero. The figure grinned, and a blush overtook their cheeks. "Oh, my sweet Izuku, you'll be mine yet." Toga Himiko, taking the form of an innocent townsperson, descended into the shadows of the alleyway. It was time to take her man all for herself. Izuku was chased much deeper into the forest than he expected. He almost wished these guards weren't as persistent, but if that were the case, he supposed there wouldn't be a point to them. He ducked and weaved through the dense forest, one for all gently coursing through his body. He ducked under a branch, and a handful of guards hit it head-on, knocking them off their horses. Sorry, he continued to run and shake guards off his tail until all that was left chasing him was a white horse. A white horse that was more persistent than anything he had ever seen in his life. He noticed that ahead of him the forest was beginning to thin out. He emerged from the forest and out to a large cliff. He froze, and then he heard the horse that was chasing him from emerge as well. He spun around, and the horse slowly approached him, snorting in anger. Izuku frowned and did the only thing he thought left to do. He jumped. As he fell, he saw the horse run to the edge of the cliff and then spin around, as if to meet him at the bottom. Izuku spun around and flicked the air in front of him to slow his fall. When he met the ground, he continued to run forward, ducking and weaving through the dense forest. When he finally came to a halt, breathing heavy, he looked around at his surroundings. He needed to find somewhere to hide, and quick, before his wounds finally got to him, and he ran out of energy. The wind blew, and for a second, he thought he could see something behind the wall of vines that he was standing beside. He walked over to the wall in curiosity and put his hand to it, surprised when the wall gave way to nothing. He quietly slipped inside and walked through the tunnel and emerged in a little grotto, complete with a waterfall and tower that reached up towards the sky, nestled comfortably in the middle of the area. He heard rustling from on the other side and quickly made his way to the tower. He frowned, seeing only one entrance at the very top of the tower, but seeing no other option, he launched himself into the air, using one for all to propel him to the top. He landed on the balcony, a bit roughly due to his condition, and he crawled inside the tower. Once he had made it through the window, he slumped down on the floor. Finally, alone at last. The last thing he remembered before the world went black was an immense pain on the back of his head and the loud twang of metal striking something. When Izuku finally came to, he thought he was finally dead, that he had walked up into some random person's house, and without knowing, and combined with his injuries, they had taken him out in one swing. However, when he noticed that he was still very sore, he ruled that out as a possibility. The next thing that he noticed was that he was wrapped up in long blonde hair. "Wait, hair!" A voice echoed out from the darkness. "Why are you here? For my hair? Did you come to steal it? Who are you?" He held his hands up in defense, the best he could being tied up anyways. Whoa, wait. I think there's been some huge understanding. Look, I didn't come here for anything. I just needed a place to go. I swear I didn't know there was anyone living in here. There was a moment of silence before what sounded like bare feet hitting the concrete floor, and the owner of the voice emerged from the shadows. Izuku was immediately drawn in by her beauty. She was petite and very dainty-looking. Her long hair that snaked around the room glistened a appealing golden color, and her green eyes were huge and inquisitive. She held out a cast-iron frying pan defensively and gave Izuku her best glare. "Who are you, and how did you find me?" Izuku, who was at a loss for words, eloquently saved himself from embarrassment. Hi." There was a moment of silence before Izuku cleared his throat. "Please, I don't want any trouble. I just needed somewhere to lay low. I've kind of been accused of something, and, I needed somewhere to hide. Let's start over, how about? My name is Izuku." But you can call me Deku, too." She gave a strange look. "That's an interesting name. I'm Rapunzel." Izuku recognized the name, although he couldn't place where he knew it from. "Oh well, it's very nice to meet you, Rapunzel. Could you maybe untie me, please? I'd hate to be a bother." She gave him a stern look. "I don't know. What if you're just pretending to be nice, so you can get my hair? What do you think, Pascal?" Izuku suddenly noticed the small green chameleon that stood proudly on Rapunzel's shoulder. The reptile made a few noises and gestures with his hands, while Rapunzel nodded in understanding. The green-haired hero wondered if she could actually understand him. I think you're right, Pascal. She then turns back to him. Okay, Izuku, if that is your real name, I have a proposition for you. Izuku gulped. What do you need? She tugged on her hair and revealed a appealing mural that she had painted, showcasing her watching several lights in the sky while sitting on a tree. Izuku looked at the painting in awe. That's appealing. She blushed. Yes, well, I want you to take me to go see those floating lights. They happen every night on my birthday, and I really want to go see them this year for my 18th. Izuku took note of her birthday and her age. She was only about a year younger than he was. He nodded. Yeah, I'll take you to go see those. That looks like it's coming from the big city, and I know where that is. So please, just untie me. She looked at him, and then looked at Pascal before nodding and releasing him from the chair. He sighed and stood up at full height before wincing in pain. He brought a hand to his side and noticed that he had bled through his stolen shirt. Oh man, it opened back up. Rapunzel noticed this as well and jumped in surprise. You're hurt. Izuku chuckled. Yeah, it's kind of a long story. She was quiet for a moment before gaining a determined look on her face. Hold on a minute and trust me. I'm going to have to wrap you up one more time. Izuku gave her an inquisitive look. What do you mean? She just gave him a pleading look. Look, just trust me and don't freak out, okay? She wrapped part of her hair around his torso, and they both sat down. Izuku's eyes widened as she began to sing. Flower, gleam and glow. He silently watched as the hair began to glow with a soft light, which traveled down to where he was, and he was filled with a snug warmth. Almost like the sun's glow itself was shining on him and taking his pain away. Soon, she finished the song and looked up at him expectantly. He unwrapped her hair and looked at where the wound was. He was surprised when there was nothing left of it at all, not even a scar. He looked back at her, his eyes shining with awe. Rapunzel, that was amazing. I had no idea that they had quirks all the way back to this time. That changes all of history. I wonder what other kinds of. He began to mutter at an alarming pace, and Rapunzel just stared at him. She leaned over to Pascal. Does this count as freaking out? The chameleon simply shrugged in response, and Izuku came out of his mumbling. He noticed that the other two had been staring at him. I was mumbling, wasn't I? Pascal nodded, as did Rapunzel. He blushed a crimson red and sheepishly rubbed the back of his neck. Sorry, it's a habit of mine. The blonde girl sat in silence before giggling a bit. Well, don't worry about it. I totally get it. Now, come on. We got to get going. Izuku nodded, and the two of them walked to the window at the same time. Izuku blushed. How about ladies first? She blushed. But how will you get down? Izuku was quiet for a moment, deciding not to reveal his own power before speaking up. Okay, yeah, I'll go first. He grabbed a hold of her hair, and Rapunzel lowered him to the ground. Shortly thereafter, she came sliding down her hair herself, stopping short just to the grass. Izuku gazed at her inquisitively, and she slowly lowered herself to the ground before fully committing and taking her first real steps in the grass. Oh my goodness, this is exactly how I imagined it. She bounded around, and Izuku watched with bemused attention as she swung around and played, but also with concern as she fretted over her decision. Eventually, she sat down downtrodden. Izuku carefully approached, not have a ton of experience when it came to sad girls, especially not those he had just met. Hey, Rapunzel, you okay? She silently shook, and Izuku realized she was crying. That was even worse. He gulped and lowered himself down beside her. Rapunzel, my mother's going to be so upset. I'm a horrible daughter. The green-haired teen gave her a curious look. Your mother will be upset? Were you not supposed to leave? Rapunzel shook her head yes. Oh, were you like? In trouble? Being punished? Rapunzel lifted her head a bit. Not really. I've just never been allowed to leave. I've never been outside before like this. It's amazing, but I feel like I've betrayed her, and all she wants is what's best for me. The green-haired teen frowned. Rapunzel. That doesn't sound like she wants what's best for you. It sounds like she's trying to keep you locked away forever, for whatever reason. Keep you from your dreams. Believe me, I know what that feels like. She looked up at him, tears still fresh on her face. You do? He nodded. I do. So I think that you shouldn't worry at all about it. And just look forward. Stay determined. We're going to take you to see those lights. She wiped her face and sniffed. Yeah, you're right, Izuku. Let's go. I'm so excited. The green-haired hero sighed in relief and led the happy-go-lucky girl towards the kingdom. That had gone much better than he expected it to. Maximus was on the hunt. His rider, the captain of the guard, had returned to Corona, but he was still hot on the trail of that murderer. He knew that he was close. He could smell it. A rustle in the bushes caught his attention, and he quickly hid himself, waiting for the culprit to show themselves. A few steps, and bam! He jumped out from behind his cover and confronted his culprit, except that it was just some random woman with a basket. She put a hand over her heart and sighed in relief. Goodness, you scared me. She then got a good look at him, a skeptical look crossing her face. A palace horse, huh? But where's your rider? There were a few seconds of silence before her face morphed into one of fear, and she uttered a single word. Rapunzel. After that, she ran off into the other direction, leaving Maximus confused and alone. The horse shrugged and continued to track his murderer. Izuku and Rapunzel had been walking for a few hours when they came across a small building off the side of the main road. There was a sign with a bright yellow duck on it. Rapunzel walked over to it. The Snuggly Duckling, huh? Well, that sounds like a wonderful place. We should totally check it out. Izuku, however, was less confident on this place. I don't know. I have a bad feeling about this, Rapunzel. However, she was not listening, and she went up to the door, leaving Izuku to closely follow her, keeping his guard up to defend from any potential threats. She opened the door and froze in her tracks. Izuku came in right behind her and saw why she froze. Seated around the establishment were several unsavory-looking characters, all of which sent glares and evil grins towards the two. Welp, I say we get out of these kind folks' hair and just be on our way. Rapunzel? The door slammed behind him. You two don't look like you'd frequent a place like this. Izuku lowered himself, getting prepared to fight back. Another one of the bandit men spoke up. Look at them clothes. I bet they got some coin on him, too. Rapunzel held her hands up. Wait, please, we don't have anything, and we don't want any trouble. I just need him to take me to see the floating lights tomorrow night at the big city. Please, I've dreamed about this day for my whole life. Don't any of you have a dream? After the short rant, the entire tavern went silent. A single man rose from the crowd and approached the two. He lowered his face to Rapunzel's, a menacing glare adorning his features. Izuku felt one for all crackling in his legs, but he held himself back when a man suddenly turned his head, a wistful expression on his face. I had a dream once. He threw an axe at a man in the corner, who had an accordion, having him play in fear of what may come. The man then began to sing, and before long, the whole tavern was singing. I have a dream. I have a dream. Izuku had to say. He was honestly impressed with the sudden shift of mood. Suddenly, they turned to him. So how about you, kid? You got a dream? The boy smiled fondly. Oh yeah, I definitely have a dream. They looked at him expectantly, and he blushed. Oh, actually I'm not that great at singing. They all gave him a look before shrugging and continuing with the song, this time with Rapunzel singing her part. Izuku smiled at the exchange, and once the song was over, everyone was cheering and being merry. However, that all stopped when the door slammed open, revealing several guards. They looked around and approached one of the men closer to the front. Listen up, you ruffians. We're looking for a criminal. There was silence in the room and a deadpan stare that was given by every single occupant of the tavern, except for Rapunzel and Izuku. Gonna Ave to be a bit more specific than that, friend. The guard growled. Young, about yay high. Messy green hair. Izuku froze. They meant him. They were here for him. A hand on his shoulder made him jump. He turned around and noticed that it was the man with the hook hand, the one that had started the whole musical number. Come on, there's a back exit. He quietly led them to a spot behind the counter and opened up a secret tunnel. Go, follow your dreams. Even you, kid. He looked at Izuku and Rapunzel and smiled before sending them into the tunnel. Izuku and Rapunzel walked in silence for a few minutes before the blonde spoke up. So, what was that about back there? Izuku flinched. Ah, remember what I told you when I first arrived at your tower? She nodded, and Izuku sighed. Well, I've been accused of a murder. Rapunzel stopped in her tracks, a surprised and slightly fearful look on her face. Izuku held his hands up. No, I didn't do anything. But he clenched his fist. I know who did. Her name is Toga Himiko. She can take the form of anyone she tastes the BLD of. Rapunzel's face had a green tinge to it. Izuku gave her a determined look. I've got to find her. Otherwise, she'll hurt a lot more than just one person. I know she'll be looking for me as well. She's obsessed. The blonde was quiet before nodding slowly. Izuku, I believe you. You don't seem like the type to lie to me, and I can feel like I can trust you. The green-haired hero smiled and relaxed his hand. Thank you, Rapunzel. That means a lot. The two were silent for a moment before they heard footsteps coming from down the tunnel. They looked at each other with slight fear before saying one thing. Run. Maximus was hot on the trail. He could smell that murderer had come down this way, with someone else in tow as well. Strangely, they had a familiar scent. A soon-to-be victim, perhaps, or even an accomplice. He'd have to find out later. At this moment, capturing the murderer was priority. The tunnel systems led to a huge water reservoir. Izuku and Rapunzel hadn't gotten much farther when the guards emerged from the tunnel. Izuku stood in front of the blonde. Go ahead of me, Rapunzel. I can handle these guys. She was about to protest, but Izuku turned to her with a confident smile, and her words died in her mouth. Instead, she just nodded in determination and swung off the small plateau they were on. Izuku looked at the guards. I'll give you one more chance to listen to me. I haven't murdered anyone. There's a shapeshifter in your kingdom. Trust me. The guards looked at each other for a moment, but then Maximus stepped up, stamping his feet and snorting in anger. Izuku sighed. Okay, I really didn't want to have to do this. He charged up one for all, only going up to about 10%, as he zipped about the guards, quickly incapacitating them where they were. Soon, all that was left was Maximus, who picked up a sword with his mouth and began to use it. Izuku dodged with stars in his eyes. Whoa, that's so cool. I've never seen a horse wield a sword. When he said that, he jumped atop the blade and then used it as a springboard to launch himself in the opposite direction, waving a salute towards the horse as he did so. Maximus simply dropped his sword and glared at the hero. Izuku landed by Rapunzel, who was giving him an awestruck look. Wow, you move really fast and can jump super high. What's the deal with that? Izuku chuckled sheepishly. Tell you what, I'll tell you when we get out of here. Suddenly, there was a loud thump, followed by an eerie groaning sound. Izuku looked up and saw that the entire dam was beginning to burst open and water was rushing out of the reservoir. Rapunzel, come on. We have to get out of here. The girl nodded, and they began running together. Izuku then had an idea. Rapunzel, get on my back. She gave him a strange look, but his face screamed urgency, so she complied. All right, hold on tight. Full cowling. 75%. He lit up like a Christmas tree, surprising Rapunzel with the sudden change. Then, he jumped up the face of the cliff, the long-haired blonde resting comfortably on his back. The climb up was hard, but soon they stood on the cliff, overlooking the water. On the other side, Izuku could see the kingdom. He set the blonde down and pointed forward. Look, we're almost there. The girl looked in delight, but turned to Izuku soon after. So, want to tell me about the whole fastness and jumping and all? Izuku sighed. Okay, let's get down there and then make camp. Then I'll tell you my story. They made their way back to the forest, deciding to set up camp near a river that probably resulted from the huge flood that they most likely just caused. Once everything was set up for the night, Izuku told Rapunzel his story. First things first, I'm from the future. Rapunzel gave him a strange look. He held his hands up in defense. No, seriously. This is going to be kind of hard to explain. I'll just give you a simple version. He told Rapunzel about All Might, and how in the future most people have magical powers and become heroes, and that he was born without them. How he was tormented when he was young, and how he met his hero and proved himself to him, and how All Might had given him his power. Wait, so it's magic? Izuku gave a SOSO gesture. Ah, kinda. That's even harder to explain. Rapunzel sighed and nodded. Okay, that's a lot to take in, but I believe you. Izuku Midoryia, you're a hero in my books. You're amazing. The green-haired hero blushed. Don't sell yourself short. You're pretty amazing too, Rapunzel. They chuckled and smiled at each other before Izuku stood up. Well, I'm gonna go get some more firewood. I'll be back in just a moment. As he walked away, Rapunzel sighed. Oh yes, quite the little charmer, isn't he? The blonde jumped at the voice, and she quickly spun around, seeing exactly who she feared was behind her. Hello, Rapunzel dear. Have fun on your little adventure with a murderer. Rapunzel frowned. He's not a murderer, Mother. Mother Godel put a hand to her chest and looked to Rapunzel in mock surprise. Really now? Then I suppose this was all just a big misunderstanding then. Oh well, I guess I'll be on my way. The long-haired blonde stayed silent, and the older woman began to circle her like she was a vulture, and Rapunzel was the prey. As if he'd ever admit it. He came up with some kind of story, I'm sure. Perhaps one about a shapeshifter, or even time travel. Rapunzel froze. How did you know? Were you eavesdropping on us? Mother Godel laughed. Oh, Rapunzel dear, I thought you were more well-read than that. She pulled a book from her basket and gave it to the girl. It's all in there, sweetie, the whole story. An entertaining read to be sure, but nevertheless, a work of fiction. Rapunzel read the description on the book's first page, as well as the first few chapters. It was uncanny. Slowly, Rapunzel felt doubt seed in her mind. No. Mother Godel looked at the girl in surprise. No. Rapunzel threw the book down. I refuse to believe it. It's not true. Izuku wouldn't lie like that. I just know it. I think he really likes me. The older woman frowned before letting out a hearty laugh. Oh, Rapunzel. Men like him can only think about one thing. She gave the girl a devious look. Their next victim. She turned around and began walking away. But don't listen to me, since you're so mature and grown up now. Watch him. Just wait and see. When he turns on you, Rapunzel, don't say that I didn't warn you. After she said that, Mother Godel disappeared into the dense forest, leaving Rapunzel alone to her devices. She picked up the book and gently dusted it off before putting it inside the log she had been sitting on. We'll see, Mother. We'll see. Izuku returned not much longer later, with a bundle of firewood in his arms before he set them down. The two talked for a little while longer, but it wasn't long before both of them were passed out in the grass. In the morning, Izuku woke up to water dripping on his face, from the horse that had been chasing him's face. Immediately the horse grabbed him and began to drag him away from Rapunzel. Evidently, the commotion woke her up because she sprinted over and began trying to placate Maximus. Whoa, whoa, hey. Come on, big guy. You need to put him down? He's my guide to the lights. I need him. Maximus remained unconvinced. Rapunzel tapped her chin before snapping. It's also my birthday day. Maximus looked back and forth between the two for a moment, before sighing in defeat, but then giving Izuku a glare, the green-haired hero lowering his head, as if giving a semi-apology. Rapunzel began petting the horse, giving him all sorts of baby talk, and Izuku rose to his feet before looking over to Rapunzel. So today's the big day. You ready? She gave a blinding smile. I've been ready for the past 18 years. He grinned and pumped his fist. That's the attitude. With those words, the three set off for the main city. It wasn't long before they reached it. Izuku looked wearily at the wanted posters that had his likeness spread all over the place, before he felt something get draped over his head. He looked up in surprise and noticed that Maximus had draped a cowl over his head. The green-haired hero gave the horse a smile, the horse simply looking the other direction. He watched Rapunzel run forward, dragging her 70 feet of hair behind her. People also noticed and were trying not to step on it or run it over. Izuku quickly grabbed the hair up giving quick apologies to the townsfolk. Unsure of what to do with the hair, he noticed a few girls sitting on a fountain and braiding each other's hair. He gave them a sharp whistle and held the hair up, and the girls were braiding Rapunzel's hair. Once they finished, her hair only went down to about her ankles. The green-haired teen whistled. "That has got to be heavy." The blonde shrugged her shoulders. "You get used to it." The ceremonies amazed Izuku. There were so many stands and food stalls and shops and people, it reminded him a lot of the UA Culture Festival. They must be celebrating something big today. He wondered what it could be. "I'm giving these flowers for the lost princess. Can you believe that she was lost on her birthday? I'd be so sad if I got lost on my birthday, but flowers cheer me up, so I brought the lost princess flowers to cheer her up." Izuku overheard the child speak, and when he rounded the corner, he noticed the huge stone mural of what he assumed to be the king and the queen and the lost princess, who seemed oddly familiar to Izuku. As he stared at the mural, he felt like something wanted to come to mind, but he just couldn't get anything. So, he returned to Rapunzel and continued in the festivities. After watching the blonde draw appealing art on the street and start a huge dance in the middle of town, Izuku noticed that the sun was beginning to set on the water. He grabbed Rapunzel by the hand. "Come on." "I did some asking around, and I found out the best place to watch the lanterns. There are lanterns, by the way, right over here." He brought her to the docks, and they rented onto the rowboats, and Izuku rowed them out to the middle of the bay. By the time they had reached a good vantage point, he turned to the blonde and grinned. "Okay, it should start any minute now. For what I gathered, the first lantern will come from the castle, in which the town will release. There's an order coming down from there." The blonde gave him an amazed look. "Whoa, you know a lot about these." Izuku blushed. "Well, I was just curious, and I asked around a lot. Apparently, this whole thing is for the princess of the kingdom, who was taken from the castle on the night she was born." "That's just crazy to me. How do you steal a newborn baby in a castle on the night it's born?" "They would." Izuku began mumbling, and Rapunzel gave a small giggle, which drew him out of his trance. He blushed in embarrassment. "Ah, sorry." She shook her head. "Don't be. It's cute." He blushed harder, and Rapunzel noticed something out the corner of her eyes. She hopped up from the spot she was sitting and rushed to the front of the boat, watching with rapt attention as a single light rose from the castle in the center of the city. Izuku grabbed the sides of the boat to steady himself and smiled at the girl's amazement. However, he was soon sucked in himself as he watched the lanterns begin to rise in droves from the city. Whoa, it's kind of amazing that they've done this every year for so long. 18 years of holding out hope. Rapunzel nodded and turned and faced Izuku with a smile. "Thank you so much for bringing me here, Izuku." The green-haired teen smiled. "Well, I've got something for you." He reached behind him and pulled out 2 lanterns. "Let's join in on the festivities." She gave a huge smile and gently grabbed one of the lanterns. They looked into each other's eyes and slowly released the lanterns, watching as they rose into the sky to meet the others. Their hands fell and landed on top of each other, surprising them both. Izuku blushed and was about to pull away when Rapunzel grabbed his hands. His eyes widened in surprise, and his entire face went red. The blonde girl gave him a warm smile. "Izuku, really? Thank you so much for bringing me here. I know that you were a bit nervous, I could tell, but this has really been the best day of my life." Izuku opened his mouth and closed it before chuckling. He then gave her an earnest look and tightened his grip around her hands. "No, thank you, Rapunzel. Honestly, I haven't had this much fun with someone in a while, and it's so nice to do this. You're so chipper and happy, and your energy is amazing." She gave a blush of her own, and they began to gaze into each other's eyes. They leaned closer to each other, and Izuku's face was getting hotter by the second. That is, until he noticed a light glinting from on shore. His focus shifted to the light, causing Rapunzel to look around in confusion. He squinted and noticed that Toga Himiko was grinning at him evilly and twirling a large knife around in her hands. Izuku frowned and grabbed a hold of the oars. "Rapunzel, hold on. I've got something to take care of." He began rowing to the shore, and Rapunzel looked out to the shore as well. However, she didn't see anything. She gave Izuku a concerned look. What is it? What did you see? Izuku had a stern look on his face as he rowed. It was Toga. I can't let her run free. They hit shore, and Izuku hopped out of the boat. He turned to the blonde and held his hand out in a stay-put gesture. If I'm not back within 5 minutes, get out of here. Toga is a very dangerous criminal, and you could get seriously hurt. Please don't follow me. She gave him a concerned look before nodding, her concern being replaced with determination. Okay, I will. He nodded and gave her a quick smile before turning and headed in the direction of Toga, a hard glare replacing the smile. He walked around the side of the shore and to where he saw the girl sitting on a log, still twirling her knife. When she saw Izuku, her smile widened. Ah, you came. Izuku snarled at the girl. Enough of the games, Toga. It's time I finally brought you in. Toga pouted and held her knife loosely at her side. Oh, come on, Izuku. You wouldn't do that to me. Without another word, she sprung at Izuku, grinning evilly as she moved her knife forward. Izuku quickly channeled one for all into his legs, dodging her attack. She spun on a dime and continued to swing the knife at him. He hopped and jumped, getting quick strikes in on the girl, but that only seemed to fuel her advance more. Suddenly, she stopped and grabbed a vial of BLD and drank it. Suddenly, she changed into a familiar face with familiar spiky blonde hair. Izuku glared. You've been keeping that for long? Toga sneered with Katsuki Bakugo's face. Stupid Deku. I've been keeping it for special occasion, just like this. She giggled and adopted her normal mannerisms, which were something Izuku never thought he'd see. She even spoke with his voice. What do you think of my impression? Great, huh? She hopped forward, and Izuku dodged again. It could use work, not nearly as explosive as Kakin. She gave a wide smile. Oh, not explosive enough for you. Suddenly, a violent explosion rang out on the other side of Izuku, and he felt the pinch of his flesh being cut before he went completely numb. He fell to the ground, unable to move, glaring up to the girl, whose disguise was beginning to melt away. When did you learn that trick? She lowered herself to his level and smiled. I've been saving it for a special occasion too, but I've known for a while now. You should have seen the look on your face. So cute. She giggled, and then licked the BLD off her knife, slowly taking the shape of Izuku before his very eyes. Now, I cannot believe that you would mess around on me. Izuku, she's very pretty and looks very sweet. But I want you all to myself, and I'm not willing to share. So maybe I should show her just how much I love her. The final part of that sentence was said with a level of malice that Izuku hadn't heard from the girl, and it sent a shiver down his spine. He frantically tried to move, growling at the girl. Don't lay a finger on her. Toga. She simply giggled and sauntered off into the other direction. Izuku tried to move, activate one for all, anything but whatever was on that knife had him frozen. Rapunzel, run. He just hoped she could hear him. Rapunzel was beginning to get nervous. She didn't know exactly where Izuku had gone, but every now and again, she'd see a flash of light. However, they had stopped a couple of seconds ago, and there was silence. She couldn't hear him or anything, and she was tempted to get off the boat and go after him. However, she held herself back. She trusted Izuku, and if he said it was dangerous, she'd trust his word. She then noticed a figure approaching through the fog. She sighed in relief. Oh, thank goodness you're okay. I was beginning to get worried. The figure walked through the fog, and the smiling face of Izuku Midoryia met hers. Yeah, don't have to worry about her anymore. She's not going to be making trouble for a long time. Izuku's look shifted to be more malicious, and Rapunzel felt fear grip her. What was going on? Come on, Rapunzel, why don't you come here? We can pick up where we left off. She stayed put on the boat. You're not Izuku. He gave a look of hurt. What do you mean? Of course I am. She shook her head. You must be the shapeshifter. What did you do with Izuku? The green-haired hero gave her a confused look, the malice melting away, looking like genuine hurt. Rapunzel, what's going on? What do you mean? It's me. She grabbed her frying pan from under her bench on the boat. Then prove it. Tell me something only Izuku would know. He tapped his chin before snapping. How about the fact that I want to be the #1 hero? I have a quirk that was given to me by someone else, or The fact that you have magic hair that glows when you sing a song? She loosened her grip. There was no way anyone else could know all of that. She leaned forward and stepped out the boat. Izuku, are you okay? Did she hurt you? He grinned. Not too bad, but I wouldn't be worried about me right now. He pulled his hand from behind his back, a large knife gleaming in the moonlight, and took a step forward. Rapunzel saw the knife and froze. Izuku, he grinned. You're a naive girl, Rapunzel. You have to be careful who you trust. He brought his knife up in a swift fashion, but before the blow could land on the long-haired blonde, he fell to the ground. A dart was sticking in his back, and he seemed to be frozen. Rapunzel looked up, and there stood her mother, a dart gun in her hand and a soft look on her face. Oh, Rapunzel dear. She rushed to her mother, fear and panic still running through her body. You were right, mother. I can't believe it, but you were right. That was him. She patted her back. Don't worry, dear. The guards have been alerted, and they'll be here soon. Let's get back home. Godel turned Rapunzel away from the prone body, leading her into the forest just as the disguise melted away, revealing that Toga Himiko had been knocked completely unconscious by the dart. Before whatever poison had been administered to Izuku could wear off, the castle guard showed up. He was still struggling, but unable to move. He screamed for Rapunzel as he was being cuffed, and when he saw Toga Himiko being lifted gently by the guards, he felt his heart raise in hope. Maybe she got away. That would be the best possible outcome, her escape. The guards carted him through town, a few townspeople looking on in fear and disgust at him. He saw Maximus, who simply gave him a look of confusion. Izuku tried his best to relay that he wanted him to go find Rapunzel, to make sure she was okay. He then directed his look to Toga, and the horse understood and nodded before going the other direction. Izuku sighed and let the guards bring him to the castle, hoping that if nothing else, Rapunzel was okay. Rapunzel got home and immediately went to sleep. She had a fitful nightmare of when Izuku attacked her, before being awoken by her mother calling her from down the stairs. She sighed and sat on the side of her bed, softly feeling the petals of one of the flowers that had been in her hair. Her mother had her take all of them out and take down the braid. No more talk of going into the kingdom. Not that Rapunzel wanted to, if there were people like that out there. She sighed, thinking about the boat ride and the lanterns. It all seemed so real. But she was wrong, and Mother was right, like usual. She thought back to Izuku and what he was telling her about the lanterns. Apparently, this whole thing is for some lost princess that was stolen away from the castle on the night of her BRTH. 18 years of holding out hope. She was distracted at the time, but now that she had time to think about it, her words struck a chord. A lost princess, stolen away on the day of her BRTH 18 years ago. A birthday that they shared to the day. She thought back to the town and the mural of the princess. A little girl with long blonde hair and big green eyes. She felt her heart skip a beat. It's me. She rose from her bed, almost in a daze, and walked out into the main part of the tower. Godel noticed her and smiled, waving her hand. Oh, hello there, sleepyhead. Someone slept in today, so let's get chop on the chores. Rapunzel mumbled under her breath. I'm a lost princess. The older woman rolled her eyes and groaned, always with the mumbling. Speak up, you know I hate that. Rapunzel steeled herself and gave Godel a glare. I'm a lost princess. Are not. Godel froze, her eyes widening for a moment, before she scoffed and laughed. Whatever gave you that idea? Rapunzel dear, you're just feeling neglected, caused the boy you like turn out to be a bad apple. The idea is preposterous. Rapunzel took a step forward, her glare hardening. Preposterous, huh? The princess that has an uncanny appearance to myself as a baby that went missing on her birthday, which just so happens to be the same as mine 18 years ago, which, would you look at that, is exactly how old I am. Is that so preposterous, mother? Or should I even call you that? Her mother glared in response, standing tall from the bottom of the stairs. Rapunzel continued. You lied to me my whole life. You even lied about Izuku, didn't you? Oh my goodness, what have you done to him? Godel sneered. He's probably being executed as we speak. I don't know if you knew, but Corona has very tight laws on murder. Rapunzel gasped. No, She lost her confidence and fell to her knees. Godel came up to her stairs, gently touching Rapunzel, but the girl slapped her hand away. "Get away from me, you lying witch." The older woman looked at the girl in surprise, before glowering at her. "I really didn't want to have to do this, but you leave me with no choice, Rapunzel." With those words, Godel grabbed the girl by the hand. Izuku paced his cell with anxiety. He had asked one of the guards on some of the legal processes in the kingdom, called Corona apparently, and he found out that murder was punished by public execution immediately on conviction, without any trial, if there's an eyewitness account. Unlucky for him, they had an exact and perfect view of him murdering. He heard the jingling of keys, and his cell opened. Already, the captain of the guard swiftly grabbed Izuku, roughly throwing him out his cell and having the guards CRT him to the courtyard. "Shut your mouth, criminal some." As Izuku walked with the guards, he could see the rope tied in a hangman's noose, and he gulped, feeling his neck slightly. The guards forced his hands down, and they came to a door. The captain tried to open it, but it was locked. "Hey," he yelled, "open this door?" Immediately. "What's the password?" The voice was familiar, but Izuku couldn't place it. Suddenly, the guards disappeared one by one, before all that was left was him and the captain. When the captain looked around and saw that Izuku was the only one left, his hand dropped to his sides. Izuku grinned sheepishly, and one for all coursed through his legs. He threw the guard into a cell and locked it with the keys. "Look, I'm really sorry, but I'll explain it all later. I've got to go for right now, though." When he ran down the hall, being chased by guards, the man with the hook hand from the tavern followed him. "Look, kid, the horse came and got us. Said that the girl was in trouble, and that you were too. So, we staged a prison break, so you can go get her, Mr. Hero." Izuku stood in the courtyard and gave him a smile and a small bow. "Thank you so much." The man waved him away. "Don't mention a kid, go save the girl. The horse is up there, we dash." Before he could finish, Izuku had already hopped up the side of the wall and was running and hopping away, lightning flashing off his body as he moved faster than Hookhand could really tell. "Well, that's a neat trick." Maximus huffed in annoyance in not being needed. Izuku bounded through the forest as fast as he could. He was tearing branches off of trees and causing extreme winds, but he didn't care. Rapunzel took priority, and he had to get there before it was too late. Soon, he came upon the tower, and with a single jump, shot directly into the entrance and into the tower itself. He came to a stop and looked around before seeing Rapunzel tied up and gagged on the other side of the room. He went to take a step forward before he felt a searing pain in his side, and he fell to one knee. He had been stabbed before, but this was unlike anything he had ever felt. "It's a special poison that I picked up on making a while ago. If the guards can't do their job and kill you, someone had to do it. It's not like that weak paralysis potion. This one will finish the job." She dropped the dagger and went over to Rapunzel, who was desperately trying to get to Izuku before he died. She fought the pulling of the chains, grunting and letting out muffled screams. Godel angrily yanked on the chain. "Quit fighting." While she fought with Godel, who was trying to drag her from the tower, her GG fell from her mouth. "I won't ever quit fighting. Not ever once in my life. Unless..." Godel gave her a curious look. "Let me heal him. Then, I'll go with you willingly and stay with you forever. I'll never fight. I'll never try to escape. I'll be a good little girl. But you have to let me heal him." The older woman glared at the girl for a moment, before sighing and loosening the chain. "Fine, but make it quick." She chained Izuku's hands to a beam in the room, and Rapunzel desperately went over to him. He grunted in pain and shakily looked at her. "Rapunzel, don't do it. I'm not worth it." The girl let out a sob, and tears fell freely from her eyes. "Don't say that. Here, just hold my hair, and I'll heal you, don't worry. You'll be fine." Izuku shakily held his hand up to her face, and she leaned towards it. "Ah, Rapunzel." She sniffed. "What is it? What's wrong?" Then, with a final act of strength, Izuku grabbed a hand full of her hair and sliced it off with the dagger that had been laying on the floor. The golden color quickly shifted to a soft brown, and the hair fell uselessly to the floor. Similarly, Izuku's hand fell limp, and the dagger slid across the floor. Godel looked at the dying hair in shock and fear before desperately trying to grab it up and use it. Her skin wrinkled at an alarming pace, and it looked as if she was decomposing before their very eyes. She covered her aging face with her cowl in shame and fear before tripping over herself and falling out of the window entrance to the tower. Her body was dust before it hit the ground. Rapunzel was panicking for an entirely different reason. Izuku's breathing was growing shallower by the second, and she couldn't heal him. She rubbed the brown hair on him and desperately sang the song, but he only worsened. She stared at his dulling eyes, and as his life faded away, he gave her a small smile. Rapunzel let her tears flow, screaming in anguish and pain. She cradled Izuku's head to her chest and softly sang the song between sniffs and hiccups. A single tear fell from her eyes and hit his cheek before it was seemingly absorbed into his skin. There was a slight golden glow and a spark of green, but it went unnoticed to Rapunzel. For Izuku, the world was completely dark. In front of him stood a very familiar man in a yellow pinstripe suit. All Might. The man turned around and looked at Izuku in surprise. Izuku, my boy, what are you doing here? The boy frowned and looked down at his hand, and then felt his chest, but there was no exit wound, nor an entry wound on his back. I think I died. All Might seemed shocked by the words. Dead, my boy? But how? I know I've been gone for a bit, but have things really gotten that bad? Izuku rubbed his neck sheepishly. Well, something came up, and I let my own dreams go for someone else. The blonde hero sighed. Well, at least I can say that you were a hero to the end, my boy, even if you're a trouble magnet. Come then, the others are this way. Before Izuku could step forward, though, a golden light pierced the black world. Izuku heard a voice calling for him. Rapunzel. All Might looked around in surprise before letting out a hearty laugh. Well, my boy, looks like you might have been mistaken on it being your time. The world began to shine brilliantly, and before Izuku was blinded by the light, All Might waved to the boy. Live a full life, my boy. Don't forget it. Izuku opened his eyes to see Rapunzel watching him with rapt attention, tears still streaming slowly down her face. Her eyes were wide with amazement, and she grabbed him and pulled him close when he smiled. Well, that was definitely interesting. How'd you heal me? I cut your hair. She laughed, still crying. I don't know, my tears, I think. But this is amazing. I can't even put into words, You know what? She then grabbed his face and pulled him into a strong kiss, surprising the green-haired boy at first, but he soon accepted it and returned the passion. She pulled away and gave him another hug. I thought you were gone. I can't believe you cut my hair like that. Couldn't wait until after I healed you. Izuku chuckled. Well, I didn't really think of that. Plus, I think I would take away the whole heroic sacrifice thing. Rapunzel laughed and snuggled into Izuku's chest. He held her tight and patted her hair with his free hand. You know, I've always had a thing for brunettes. They sat like that for a few moments before she rose up and undid his chains. Then she told him about her epiphany, which led to this whole ordeal, and Izuku was blown away. Of course, it all makes sense. Everything is coming together. We have to get you to the castle. And that's exactly what they did. When news reached the king and queen that someone that was claiming to be their daughter was standing right outside, they couldn't be there any quicker. And with one look, they knew it was her. Izuku watched the familial exchange with fondness, and the queen offered her hand to him and pulled him into the huge hug. The green-haired teen sighed and smiled. He may not ever go home to his own time, but at this moment, everything was perfect. After explaining what happened to the guards and the story being supported by the royalty, the kingdom took the bounty off of his head and began to search for Toga Himiko, who had apparently went missing in the confusion of the prison break. Izuku vowed to help them bring her in, not wanting anyone else to be hurt. Everyone else involved were also pardoned for breaking a convict out of prison and were free to pursue their dreams. Even the tavern thugs. As Izuku looked out on the kingdom from the balcony in Rapunzel's room, he smiled at the beauty. Rapunzel walked up and stood beside him, leaning her head on his arm, and he did the same. He felt like he truly belonged here with Rapunzel, and he knew that he'd stay with her through whatever adventures may come their way. Go Rapunzel! Rapunzel breathed heavily as she rode through the dense forest that surrounded Corona, Izuku close behind her, as well as a battalion of guards following them. She grinned and bobbed and weaved around a few branches, while her horse tried to shake the castle guards off her tail. A few wiped out, and she winced before patting the brown horse she rode on the head. Good job, Fidel. She looked over to the side, and Izuku gave her a nod, signaling for the two of them to split. With them, a couple of guards followed each in an attempt to catch them. Izuku grinned, feeling the wind rushing through his hair. He leaned down and spoke to the horse he was riding. Hey, Maximus, I have an idea. The horse looked over at him and nodded, and he activated full cowling and jumped from Max's back. When the guards finally caught up to the white guard horse, they noticed that Izuku was completely MIA. One of the guards looked around, confused. Well, where'd he go? Suddenly, a branch swung around and knocked him smooth off of his horse, Izuku jumping back onto Max's back soon after. After a few turns, he met back up with Rapunzel, who had also gotten rid of most of her guards. Behind them, the captain of the royal guard followed them in hot pursuit. Both of you, stop right there. As they proceeded, they noticed that there was a large river up ahead of them. Rapunzel gave Izuku a knowing look. You thinking what I'm thinking? Izuku grinned. Only if you're thinking what I'm thinking. The two prodded the horses to speed up and watched as the captain attempted to follow them. Maximus and Fidel bounded across the small river, Fidel landing smooth on the shore, and Max landing on a dead tree trunk before it sunk into the water below. The captain, however, did not make the jump and landed directly into the middle of the river. Izuku winced. Sorry. They continued forward, Rapunzel reaching the huge wall that bordered the kingdom and using her horse to give her a boost to the top of it. Izuku followed her closely, small arcs of green, lightning jumping off of his skin as he landed. Dang, I knew I should have gone with 45% instead of 35%. Well, I guess you won this one, Rapunzel. The brunette girl giggled and gazed out over the expansive land that was beyond the walls. It's appealing, isn't it? Izuku watched Rapunzel with a fond gaze as she admired the countryside. Yeah, you sure are. He then blushed when he realized what he said, but Rapunzel hadn't seemed to notice. She spun around and put her arms around the green net. I would love to see what's out there. What kind of adventures? I just can't even imagine. Izuku smiled. I'm absolutely sure it's amazing out there. The princess smiled at the young hero, but their moment was soon interrupted when the captain of the guard called out to them. All right, then you two. Party's over. Time to head back to the castle and get ready. The festivities and events for your coronation are about to begin. Rapunzel sighed, but Izuku put a hand on her back and gave her a million-watt smile. Don't worry, Rapunzel. You got this in a bag. You're amazing, remember? She gave him a smile and a peck on the lips, making him blush strongly, and they hopped off the wall. Rapunzel landed on her horse and looked over to the captain. All right then, let's go. He nodded, and they began to ride back towards the main city. Rapunzel sighed and looked wistfully back to the Corona wall, thinking about how much she wanted to go explore the wide, open world out there. She tightened her grip on the reins, something that Izuku noticed. He tapped on Maximus's side, signaling him to speed up, and he caught up with the princess. Hey, don't worry about this whole coronation thing. I promise that you'll do great. Just be yourself, and they're bound to love you. I mean, what's not to love? She blushed and smiled. You're right, Izuku. I'm just a little jittery. She bit the inside of her cheek, feeling a little bad for lying about what had her down, but Izuku hadn't seemed to notice, so she just kept her mouth shut. He gave her a small smile, and she returned it. Once they had returned to the castle and gotten off of their horses, Rapunzel and Izuku walked to her room in the castle. That way the princess could begin to get ready for the greeting of the guests. Raps! A voice called out from behind them, and the two of them turned around. Izuku took a step back, but Rapunzel jumped for joy. Cass! She enveloped the other woman in a hug, which seemed to make her a bit uncomfortable before they separated. Cass, who was wearing a blue dress and white headpiece, looked Rapunzel up and down before shaking her head. Come on, Raps. I know you're new to this whole thing. But running around barefoot? Really? The brunette princess simply shrugged and blushed. What can I say? I don't like shoes. She giggled, and Izuku let out a chuckle, which drew Cassandra's attention to him. She gave him a sharp look. Shouldn't you be out stopping criminals or something? Do you not have anything better to do? Izuku simply looked down, blushing. Actually, yeah. Rapunzel, I'll be back a little later to visit you before the other royals arrive, but the captain asked me to help with the patrol. The look on Cass's face hardened a bit, but Rapunzel simply smiled and gave him a peck on the cheek. Okay, Izuku, I'll see you later. He smiled and returned it, before giving Cassandra a curt nod and speed walking away. The two began to walk back to Rapunzel's room, and the princess gave her lady-in-waiting a curious look. Why do you dislike Izuku so much? The girl scoffed. I don't dislike him, he's great. He has cut crime in the city by almost 90% and is a great influence on all the guards. Rapunzel gave her a strange look, and Cassandra sighed. Sarcasm, Raps. He's too bright and cheery. I don't trust him one bit. He's got to have a dark side. He's way too nice all the time. No one that nice is really that nice behind closed doors. Rapunzel rose her eyebrow and gave her a small frown, and Cassandra held her hands up. You're different, Raps. You were locked in a tower for 18 years. You're crazy. The princess gave a mock gasp and pouted at Cass before the two began to laugh. When they finally reached her room, Cassandra began to help Rapunzel prepare. So, where did you two go anyway? Rapunzel sighed. We went out to the kingdom wall. I just wanted to see the view again. The lady-in-waiting nodded. Yeah, it's pretty impressive. The brunette looked over to her friend, who was currently mending the small splits and tears in her dress. What I wouldn't give to just go explore it. I bet there's so much stuff out there that I've never even heard of. Cassandra paused for a minute before she continued, an idea forming inside her head. Unbeknownst to her, a similar idea was forming in Izuku's head. I gotta get Rapunzel a day out one of these days. I can tell being cooped up in the castle for the last 6 months is beginning to drive her crazy. He stood perched up on the walls of the castle, watching the back alleys nearby carefully, looking for any shady activity. It seemed to be a relatively slow day, but then again, since he showed up, the amount of slow days for crime seemed to be becoming more and more common. He tapped his chin, becoming lost in thought for a moment. Maybe I could ask the king if we could go out and explore the town. Despite being outside of city gates a few times, she's hardly been around the town. It would be good to meet the citizens, and it may improve her state of mind. The royals show up tonight, so tomorrow morning would be free before the coronation dinner starts that evening. We could. He began to mumble up a storm, something that he had yet to get a handle on. However, his mumbling storm came to a halt when he heard some scuffling nearby, as well as footsteps. He stood up and charged one for all up, hopping across the roofs and down into the alleyway where he had heard the sound. He looked around on high alert, but didn't see anyone. On the ground nearby, there was a flyer for the princess's coronation. He stared at the paper for a moment, before slipping into his pocket and jumping back out of the alley. In the shadows, a man with rodent-like features watched the green net jump away, a grin encompassing his face. He slunk back into the darkness, entering a grate on the side of the building and descending below it. After a few moments of walking, he came upon a small room with a handful of people standing around. He threw the paper onto the table. Lady Kane, I found this outside. The woman sitting at the table grabbed the paper, taking a moment to read it before lighting it on fire and letting it burn. Well, looks like we'll be paying our royalty some respect this weekend. What do you think? She looked over to her side, and another woman stood there, a sadistic grin weaved across her face, slightly pointed teeth visible. If I get to see my Izuku, then I'm down for anything. Lady Kane chuckled and stood up. Good enough for me. So here's the plan. Cassandra grabbed Rapunzel by the shoulders, looking her up and down before nodding. All right then, Raps. You ready? The brunette sighed and nodded, a determined look gracing her features. I guess so. Her handmaiden brought her outside, where she took her place next to her parents. She noticed Izuku watching from on top of the wall and sent him an enthusiastic wave, to which he smiled and blushed, giving her a quick wave of his own. Her father cleared his throat and gave her a warm look, signaling her to rein it in. She quickly put her hands down and blushed. Soon, the first royal arrived. "Your Highness, I present Dame Elizabeth Van Hoskins from Rochester." An older woman stepped out of her carriage, with help from the announcer, and took a couple of steps forward to be greeted, to which she was promptly wrapped in a large hug from Rapunzel. "Oh, get in there." She set her down, the woman now clearly flustered and confused, and began to straighten her dress and hat. Cassandra rolled her eyes, and Izuku winced a little at the display. He was no stranger to an awkward public encounter, so he felt Rapunzel's embarrassment for her, since she didn't seem to know any better. The woman walked away, still clearly dazed and confused. The king leaned towards his daughter. Rapunzel perhaps refrained from the bear hugs. The princess made an "oh" expression and nodded. "Of course, got it. No bear hugs." The next guest was a highly decorated military official, who Rapunzel offended by trying to give him a nickname, as he did have a relatively long name. Izuku could tell she was beginning to lose the wind in her sails, and the final straw was the third Nobel, a younger woman with a huge wig on. Rapunzel looked at the tall wig with an awestruck look. "Wow, I love your hair. I used to have long hair and dash." She was cut off when the Nobel girl scoffed. "This is a wig crafted from some of the finest silks in the 7 kingdoms, signifying someone of high status and caliber. You would think you would know that." She pivoted to the side and walked away, leaving the brunette princess deflated and downcast. She stayed relatively quiet for the rest of the greeting, only giving small hellos and welcomes as to not offend anyone else. After the greeting, Rapunzel retreated to the docks, laying in one of the small boats tied to a post, watching the stars in silence. The sound of footsteps alerted her to someone approaching, and she looked up, seeing Izuku standing there, holding a couple of cupcakes for them to share. "Mind if I join?" She smiled and moved over, allowing him room to sit down beside her. He handed her one of the cupcakes, and they began to gaze at the stars together. Rapunzel sighed and looked over. That was a disaster. Izuku choked a bit on his cupcake before shaking his head. It wasn't that bad at all. She gave him a skeptical look, and he was silent before blushing. "Okay, the bear hug was a bit much." Rapunzel groaned and leaned back in the boat. "I just don't know about all of this, Izuku. Maybe I'm just not cut out for this whole princess thing." Izuku placed his hand on hers. "Rapunzel, one bad press event doesn't mean it's the end of your career." She gave him a strange look, and he blushed. What I mean is, you're brand new at this. It's natural that you're going to be a little awkward and not as well acquainted with the procedures. Trust me, if anyone knows, it's me." She leaned up, staring at him curiously. "You've done stuff like that before?" Izuku laughed and blushed. "Oh yeah, there's a lot of press stuff involved with being a pro hero. One time, I accidentally spilled punch all over a really important military figure's uniform at a dinner party, in front of hundreds of people. I could have died." The two shared a laugh, and Izuku pulled the girl closer to him. "What I'm saying is, you'll get the hang of it. One day, you'll be the greatest Queen Corona has ever seen." She smiled, but it fell when his words hit her. Queen of Corona. It was her ultimate destiny. No matter what she did, that's where she'd end up. She wondered for a moment if that was her entire story. The returned lost princess, stuck in an old castle for the rest of her life. She sighed in resignment, and Izuku looked over to her. "Hey, Rapunzel, you okay?" She nodded, now just as sullen as before. "Yeah, just thinking." The greenette was silent for a moment before his idea came back to him. "Hey, what if you took the day off tomorrow? Explored the town, got to know the subjects?" She immediately perked up. "Izuku, that's a great idea. But how?" He gave her his signature smile. "We'll talk to the king. I'm sure he'd allow it. I mean, it's just a trip into town. It's not like he's going to send you with an entire team of guards." Unfortunately, that's exactly what her father did. Izuku tried to advocate that he could go with her rather than all the guards, but her father wouldn't budge. Either she left the castle with the protection he chose, or she didn't leave. She sighed, looking around as people looked nervously at the guards, clearly not wanting to make a wrong move around the princess. It probably didn't help that they all brandished weapons and were suspiciously looking around at people. She had to imagine it was an intimidating sight, but she tried her hardest to enjoy the things the townsfolk had to offer. However, this would prove to be a difficult task, as most of the places that she went, her fun was intercepted and arrested by the guards before she could even have a crack at enjoying it. From throwing water on a man that was juggling fire to completely destroying any kind of food item that came her way. Rapunzel sighed, feeling just as trapped as she had before. Once the day had ended, she laid across her bed, and Cassandra stood beside her, arms crossed. Big day out, not as great as you expected? Rapunzel sat up. Well, Pascal gave a thumbs down and blew a raspberry. The princess looked up to Cassandra. I just wanted to go explore and get to know the townspeople. I want to see the real world. Cassandra grinned and looked at the window. Well, I could get you in and out before anyone ever noticed. We could go sightseeing. Rapunzel gave her a scandalous look, but was smiling. You mean like sneak out? The handmaiden shrugged, an innocent smile on her face. Rapunzel sighed, and there was a knock on the door. The royal banquet is ready to receive the princess. Cassandra shrugged and walked past Rapunzel. Cheer up, Raps. Maybe your dad got someone to chew your food up for you too. The banquet was intimidating to look at, with the sheer amount of nobles seated around. Izuku was sat at a small table nearby, sitting with the children that had been brought along. He seemed confused, but was going with it anyway. Cassandra grinned at the sight. Gotta love the perks of being in charge of the seating. As Rapunzel picked through her food, she began to speak to her father. So, it would have been pretty cool if I had a bit more freedom earlier today. The king didn't look away from his plate. I told you that you could do what you wanted, and that's what you did. Rapunzel nodded. Yeah, but maybe it would have been better without the battalion of guards following me. He gave her a challenging smile. Your royalty, Rapunzel, making a public appearance. It's a requirement. Before she could make a rebuttal, one of the nobles spoke up from their table. King Frederick, if you don't mind me asking, do you already have a suitor picked out for Princess Rapunzel? Rapunzel nearly choked on her food. Suitor? The king shook his head. Why, David? She's not even been coronated yet. We must give her some time to adjust. The man chuckled and held his hands up. Of course. I was just curious. My youngest son has just become of age recently, and I would be honored if he'd be considered. Her father nodded. Of course. Rapunzel looked back and forth between them, before giving a small frown. Suitor? I already have a boyfriend, father. Izuku blushed from his seat, and the other nobles began to speak amongst themselves. Her father gave her a strong look. Rapunzel, it would be better if you didn't mention Izuku. The words struck a chord with the princess, and she felt her temper rise. And why not? He is my boyfriend, and I'm not going to leave him for some random suitor. The murmurings increased, and her father looked around, a small frown on his face. Rapunzel, please calm down. This is no place to discuss this. She frowned and set her fork down before standing from her chair. I need a moment. She stormed out of the room, closely followed by Cassandra, and, after a couple of minutes, Izuku. In her room, Rapunzel paced back and forth, a pit forming in her stomach. Cassandra came in after a second, and the princess immediately began to vent. It's another thing that he's trying to control in my life. I hate feeling like I'm being trapped. I've already been trapped enough. After the outburst, she sat down and sighed. I know he wants what's best for me, but what if what's best for me is for him to lay off a little? Give me a little freedom? Cassandra looked out of the window. Rapunzel, let's go. The princess gave her a strange look. Go. Where? The lady in waiting grinned, taking off her handmaiden uniform, revealing a more adventurous-looking outfit. Out. Before she could agree, a voice echoed from the doorway. You're sneaking out? They both spun around, and one Izuku Midoryia stood in the doorway, giving the two girls a curious look. Cassandra glared at him. What are you going to do? Tell everyone. He shook his head. Rapunzel clearly needs this, so I'm not going to stop you. The black-haired girl seemed surprised for a moment, but I'm definitely tagging along. Then, she gave him a skeptical look. So, Mr. Hero Man is breaking the rules? Izuku chuckled. You may be surprised, but I'm actually a bit of a problem child. I'm no stranger to breaking the rules, especially for a good cause. He clenched his fist and gave a determined look. Cassandra sighed and shrugged. Fine, fine, but you better not slow us down. Come on, I have a cowl in my room. The trio went to Cassandra's bedroom, and she began to dig around in the wardrobe full of weapons that she had in the corner. Izuku really hoped she wouldn't use any of them on him. After a second of looking, she pulled out a dark purple cowl and gave it to Rapunzel. All right, come on. I know a way where they'll never spot us. She led the three to a series of tunnels, which led to the outskirts of town, where two horses waited. Cassandra looked at Izuku. Looks like I only brought enough for me and Raps. That's too bad. Izuku shrugged before lighting up with the effects of one for all. I'll just have to go on foot then. He easily kept pace with the two horses, launching himself from tree to tree like a grasshopper on speed. They sped through plains and besides waterfalls and through the dense forest that covered most of the kingdom. Rapunzel sang to herself, and it warmed Izuku's heart to see the girl happy and free. Soon, they reached the kingdom walls, and Cassandra turned to Rapunzel. All right, there's something over there that I want to show you something. They climbed over the wall, the horses coming as well, and Izuku followed suit. Cassandra turned to them. Remember, no one can know that I took you outside of castle walls. Rapunzel nodded. Don't worry, I won't tell a soul. Izuku gave her a nod as well. Don't worry, I can keep a secret pretty well. At least, he was getting better. Soon, the group came across a bridge that was falling in on itself. Rapunzel began to cross on Maximus before he stopped, clearly nervous about the bridge's state. He whinnied, and Rapunzel patted his head. How about you wait here with Fidel, while the three of us go on ahead? He seemed a bit skeptical, but Izuku gave him a warm smile. Don't worry, Max. I'll keep an eye on them. He still seemed worried, but that seemed to ease his mind, and the three of them crossed the bridge and began walking toward the cliffside. Izuku noticed that there was a strange feeling in the air. Soon, they reached the cliff and saw that there was a part that extended out, a stone memorial sitting on the edge of the rock. Surrounding it were tall, sharp, black rocks. Izuku frowned. I'm not so sure about this. Something's not right. Rapunzel seemed distracted, and Cassandra ignored him. The princess admired the rocks. They're appealing. Cassandra grinned and walked over to the one that Rapunzel was standing by. They popped up over here about a year ago. I have no idea where they're from or what they're for, but I know one thing. She grabbed her sword and struck the rocks. Immediately on impact, the sword shattered. They're completely indestructible. Rapunzel stared at them in awe and walked over to the memorial. This is where they found the sun-drop flower. Izuku walked over to Rapunzel and looked at the dusty stone. This is cool and all, but I think we should get out of here soon. I've got a bad feeling about all of this. Rapunzel mindlessly reached out and dusted the stone off, revealing the engraving that told about the queen and how she got sick. As she did, the rocks began to glow an ethereal blue color, and Rapunzel reached out to touch it. Izuku noticed this, but before he could say a word, the world exploded in a blast of blue light, sending them rocketing back towards the cliff face. Rapunzel rose, clearly dazed, before she noticed the golden lock of hair that was adoring her bangs. She pulled it in surprise, as if to check if it was real. However, before anything could be said, black rocks began to violently sprout out of the ground, coming directly towards the trio. Out of instinct, Izuku grabbed the two girls, hoisting them up on his shoulders and hopping away, using full cowling at about 50%. However, the rocks were not letting up their pursuit. He looked at Cassandra. Take Rapunzel and go. I'll see if I could do anything. She grabbed the princess by the hand and began running back towards the kingdom, and Izuku turned to the rocks, lowering down into a fighting stance. He launched forwards and landed a 100% attack on one of the rocks. Smash! The rock glowed a violent blue and exploded into pieces. However, another one grew directly in its place, and Izuku knew that they wouldn't let up and that he couldn't destroy them all. So, he made a tactical retreat. When he caught up with Cassandra and Rapunzel, he noticed something was out of place. There was now 70 feet of glowing blonde hair attached to his girlfriend's hair. He stared at it in confusion and awe. What happened? Rapunzel felt fear seize her heart. Oh my goodness, what are we going to tell my father? What will he think? Cassandra paled for a second before grabbing Rapunzel's hand. We're not going to tell him. Come on, we'll just cut it and go back and pretend like none of this ever happened. Rapunzel looked at her for a moment before nodding. Yeah, that would be easy, like it never happened. Izuku approached the two and gave Cassandra a curious look. Didn't you destroy your sword on those rocks? She paused for a moment before cursing. You're right, and I didn't think to bring an extra dagger. I didn't figure we'd be gone long enough to get into trouble. The green net chuckled. Oh, well, we seem to be trouble magnets. Rapunzel winced a little. Yeah, sorry, Cass. The black-haired handmaiden shook her head. No, don't worry about it. We'll just get you back to the castle and cut it there. We snuck you out, so surely it won't be much harder to sneak you back in, despite all your added length. Izuku nodded. Yeah, we'll get back, and we'll get it cut. No need to worry. As if on cue, the sound of cracking ground and breaking trees began to close in on them. They turned back towards the forest and saw the black rocks from before growing and chasing after them. Like now, they began to run away, Izuku grabbing up both Rapunzel and Cassandra like he did before and hopping away like an overgrown rabbit. When they got back to the horses, Maximus stared at the princess in shock, the girl simply shrugging sheepishly and smiling. The two girls were almost thrown on the horses upon mounting them, urging them forward. The rocks were a good ways behind them, so once they crossed the wall, they slowed to an urgent walk rather than an all-out sprint. The journey back to the castle was much less whimsical and lighthearted than the journey out. With the combined worry and curiosity of the black rocks, as well as the return of Rapunzel's hair, the three were mostly silent for the entire ride. Izuku was lost in thoughts most of the way, walking alongside Maximus, who Rapunzel was quietly riding. I wonder, were those black rocks? Evidently, they're connected to the sun drop in some way. They were at the site of where the flower had been. Not to mention, they made Rapunzel's hair grow back somehow. Which, that doesn't make a lot of sense either. Did it speed up the growth? Or did it revert the hair in time? It seems to be magical still, so I'd lean towards the latter, but his mumbling grew faster and more complex, and soon, even Rapunzel's head was spinning. Cassandra groaned and threw her boot at him. It hit him upside the head, and he immediately snapped out of his mumbling fit. The lady-in-waiting gave Rapunzel a deadpan look. Does he do that often? Izuku blushed, and Rapunzel nodded. Yeah, it's cute though, so I don't mind. Cassandra rolled her eyes, and the green net continued to blush, still thinking about the logistics of the hair. When they finally made it back to the castle, they were exhausted from the journey. Cassandra sighed. All right, let's get that hair cut so we can go to bed. The other two nodded in agreement, Izuku already holding a pair of scissors. He took them to Rapunzel's hair, and they shattered. He stared at the broken blades in his hands. I don't think that's normal. Cassandra also stared at the scissors before frowning. Okay, so we're going to have to go a bit heavier duty than those. Izuku frowned. I don't know if that's such dash. Before he could finish his sentence, Cassandra already had Rapunzel laid out over a table, lifting a large broadsword and bringing it down on her hair. The force broke the table, and the sword shattered on impact. Cassandra stared at the now useless blade and threw it to the side. All right, new plan. We're going to dye it brown and just say that it miraculously grew 70 feet overnight. Rapunzel gave her a deadpan stare, and the handmaiden sighed. Well, what else do you want me to do? I'm not destroying every weapon I have trying to break through your hair. It's just like those black rocks. Izuku frowned. I broke one of those rocks. The black-haired woman stared at him. You what? He nodded. I hit it full strength, and it broke. Although I don't think punching Rapunzel's hair would be a good idea, even if it did work. The force alone might be enough to take out this entire wing of the castle, if it backfired. Cassandra rolled her eyes. Man, over-exaggerate much. She mumbled under her breath. Izuku turned to the blonde again princess. Rapunzel, we're just going to have to tell your father what happened tonight. Cassandra froze up before waving her arms out. No, 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 no. We're not telling anyone. We'll just say that Rapunzel's hair magically grew back out overnight. I mean, it's pretty believable, right? That there's some magic left after all, and it made her hair come back. Izuku frowned. I don't know. I think it'd be simpler just to tell King Frederick. Plus, he may know something of those rocks that were chasing us. Cassandra growled and turned to Rapunzel. Come on, Raps. You can't say a word. You promised. The princess looked conflicted before sighing. You're right, Cassandra. We just try to hide it or make up some excuse. We won't have to tell anyone. The black-haired handmaiden sighed in relief. That's my girl. Now, if you don't excuse me, I'm going to bed. She left the room, and Izuku gave Rapunzel a soft look. Hey, Rapunzel, I trust you, but I don't know if it's a good idea to keep this one a secret. She sighed. I know, but I did promise Cass. We have to at least try first. The green net gazed at her for a moment before sighing. Okay, we'll try it, but the truth's going to come out eventually. She nodded. I know, but don't worry about that now. I think Cass has got the right idea, though. We could all use some sleep. He nodded and gave her a soft kiss on the lips and left the room, giving a small smile before he closed the door. Rapunzel immediately sighed and collapsed on the bed, playing with her hair. Oh, Pascal, what are we going to do? The chameleon snuggled into her hair and shrugged, clearly content to be in the long again hair. Rapunzel sighed and drifted off to sleep. When she awoke, Cassandra was milling about her room, back in her blue servant dress. The princess groggily rose from her bed, and the black-haired handmaiden gave her a smug look. Someone slept good. Rapunzel chuckled and noticed the long blonde hair that was completely surrounding her. She frowned and sighed. Okay, so it wasn't just all a bad dream. Her friend shook her head. You know, but I do have an idea. Remember that uppity noble girl that had the huge wig? Izuku stared at his girlfriend as she ate breakfast with him and her parents. The wig was definitely Cassandra's idea, he decided. After a few seconds, King Frederick cleared his throat and began to speak. Ah, Rapunzel dear, about last night. The princess smiled and poked around on her plate, clearly struggling to balance her 10 pounds of hair on top of her head like that. What about it? He frowned before looking around, trying to find the right words. Ah, well, I didn't mean for it to sound like I was trying to marry you off to some random suitor. I know that you and Izuku are emotionally involved. I just couldn't brush off the offer that he made. It would have been very rude, especially since you and Izuku aren't officially engaged. The green net nearly choked on his food when the king mentioned engaged. He hadn't even thought about that yet. Of course, royalty got married young. It wasn't like the future, where it would be fine if he waited a few years. As he was having his mini panic attack, Rapunzel sighed. I'm sorry I got so heated. It's just, I feel like I'm being coddled and trapped, and I just got out of 18 years being locked in a tower with 2 rooms. The king winced and nodded. I understand. I have trouble sometimes separating myself from my duties and responsibilities, and well, I just fear that if I don't hold on to you tight, you may slip from my grasp once again. I can't handle that, especially after only having you back for the short time that I have. Rapunzel's eyes softened, and she sighed. I understand. I love you, Dad. I just need a little bit more room to breathe. He smiled. I'll do what I can. Rapunzel smiled and nearly tipped over with her wig. Izuku noticed a strand of golden hair slip out, and she was quick to stuff it back under. He winced, and she hopped out of her seat. Well, I better get going. I have a lot of princessing up to do. She waddled away, trying to balance the mass on her head, and her parents stared at her in confusion. Izuku simply sighed and looked over to them. She's just a little nervous. It didn't seem to ease their confusion much, but it didn't matter because Izuku wasn't far behind her. Before he reached her room, however, he came across Cassandra, calmly sewing a dress for the coronation. He awkwardly milled about the room for a moment and silently watched her work, and she threw her needle down. What? Do you want this job too? He gave her a confused look, and she shook her head. Never mind. Just what do you want? He frowned. I'm going to go out on a limb and say the wig idea was yours. She rose her eyebrow. And the green net sighed. I'm just not sure how good idea keeping this away from everyone is. I mean, she can't wear that wig forever. The handmaiden scoffed. She isn't going to wear it forever, just until we can get it cut. Don't worry, I know a guy, and I'm working on it. Izuku was skeptical, but before he could rebut, Cassandra stood up and walked away with the dress. The green net sighed and decided to begin getting ready himself. Rapunzel sighed and ran her fingers down the leather-bound journal her mother had gifted her. She was surprised to hear of her mother's past, but she guessed that's where she got her free spirit from. After a moment of flipping through the blank pages of the journal, Cassandra walked in the door, holding her dress. All right, Raps, you ready? The dress was a bit much in her opinion, but she couldn't say that it didn't look nice. Something a princess would wear, for sure. That combined with her wig, and she looked like the absolute real deal. Cassandra grabbed her on the shoulders and gave her a warm smile. Don't worry, you've got this in the bag. Just about half an hour, and it'll be downhill from there. Rapunzel smiled and nodded. You're right, Cass. Thank you. She gave the girl a small hug and made her way to the throne room, where everyone was prepared to begin the coronation. She walked through the door and spotted her father and mother, as well as an older man holding her crown at the front. Then, near the front of the crowd, she saw Izuku smile and give her a small wave. She returned it, and then stumbled forward a bit, having trouble balancing her hair. Whoa, excuse me. She could hear the mumbling amongst the members of the crowd, but she was much more focused on trying not to expose herself, especially in front of all these people. In the commotion, the woman from the greeting that had the wig slipped out of the room, out of sight from anyone else, and headed down to the castle dungeons. 2 guards stood post, and as she neared, one of them stepped forward. You lost, ma'am. He was immediately knocked out by the other guard, who melted away to reveal a grinning Toga Himiko. Took you long enough. The noblewoman scoffed and got out of the puffy dress and wig that she was wearing. Shut your trap, witch. The girl simply giggled, and they walked into the prison and released the other criminals in their group. They smiled, and the rat-like man stepped forward. We're ready for Phase 2, Lady Kane. As Rapunzel stood at the front of the room, Cassandra came in, a bit late to the party. She carried Pascal on her shoulder, and as she was walking forward, she felt him tapping her neck. Then, he pointed at the front door. She turned her head to catch a quick glance, and noticed a man she hadn't seen before wearing the uniform of a guard. She knew that it wasn't a new recruit, because she knew every single person on the guard, as well as what she looked like. She told Pascal to go retrieve Maximus, and she took her place near the front, before getting Izuku's attention and motioning at 2 more fake guards that were blocking the north entrance. Izuku tensed up in shock, his eyes widening. Before they could do anything, though, a voice called out from behind them. Attention, everyone. They turned around, and a woman with brown hair and what looked to be like pirate clothes sauntered through the doorway, followed by several other thugs that quickly surrounded all the nobles. Izuku cursed, holding off on taking action until he found out what they were trying to do. King Frederick stepped forward. Release my guests at once. The woman gave him a strange look. Oh no? Do you really think I'm going to listen to you, Fred? If they weren't in the middle of a hostage situation, Izuku would think that it was an almost funny line. The king growled, and Rapunzel stared at the woman. Wait, aren't you that Duchess? The woman laughed. No, the name's Lady Kane, and I'm here to put your old man behind bars. The princess cocked her eyebrows in confusion. Why for? There was a moment of silence before Lady Kane gave her an incredulous look. What do you mean, why for? When you went missing, the king cracked down HRD on the law. Even little lawbreakers hardly got a trial. My own father got hanged just for stealing a few things from a local merchant. Injustice, I say. So, we're really just paying it forward. The king winced, and then was grabbed by 2 of the thugs and thrown into a prison cart that had been backed into the throne room. Rapunzel took a step forward, and King Frederick yelled out to her. Don't move, Rapunzel. There's nothing you can do. Don't fight her. The princess grimaced and stepped back into place. Lady Kane chuckled. Good little girl. Izuku took a step forward, itching to act. One of the larger thugs pointed a sword at him. Don't try and be a hero, kid. The greennet grinned at the wording. Oh, I didn't plan on trying. Immediately, he fired up one for all at 25% and zipped around the two thugs, knocking them out in an instant almost. Lady Kane saw this and growled, "Which? Now will be a good time to step in." A figure dropped from the ceiling, right in front of Izuku, and the teen froze. Toga, the blonde girl, giggled and blushed, licking her sharp teeth. "Did you miss me?" He shuddered and increased his full cowling. "No, I did not. Cassandra, Rapunzel. Take care of these other guys. I'll handle Toga." He kicked Cassandra a sword, which she immediately began to use near flawlessly, and Rapunzel sighed, before shucking the wig off and using her hair to grab a frying pan that was hanging on the back of the cart. Her father looked at her hair in shock. Wadash! She began to spin the frying pan around, fighting off the thugs that had her surrounded. "No time to explain. Don't worry. I'll tell you later." The man simply closed his mouth and watched as they fought the criminals. Izuku was up to around 65% of one, for all once he finally gained the upper hand against Toga. "You aren't getting away this time, Toga." She giggled, swiping her knife at him again. "Oh, I'm not going anywhere, Zuka." He grimaced at her nickname for him, and Cassandra frowned. "Ex-girlfriend." Izuku scoffed. "She wishes." And they continued to fight. Soon, Maximus had entered the fray as well. It was Lady Kane against Rapunzel and Cassandra. Avoiding getting whacked by a cast-iron skillet and avoiding being stabbed at the same time was definitely not on her bucket list. But she had to admit, the princess had some fight. "I gotta admit, princess, you've definitely got some fight." Rapunzel chuckled, slightly winded. "Well, I've had a little bit of practice knocking people out with one of these bad boys." She then got a clean swipe in and knocked her smooth to the ground. Izuku, at the same time, landed a solid punch to Toga's stomach, sending her back flying, and he made his way directly to her and began to tie her up with some of the rope that was on the prison cart. "Come on, let's get all these guys tied up." Rapunzel and Cassandra began to help him, and before long, it was all the thugs that were stuck in the prison cart, and the nobles were all let free. King Frederick walked over to Rapunzel. "Meet me in about an hour. We need to talk." She gulped in fear and looked over to him. He had an unreadable expression on his face, and he walked away. Her mother wrapped her in a hug, thanking God that she was safe, but Rapunzel's thoughts were elsewhere. Later that evening, and Rapunzel had told her father about how she had left and touched the black rocks, causing her hair to grow. "And you acted alone?" She gave a hesitant nod, and he sighed. Rapunzel then stepped up closer to him, holding her hands out in a placating gesture. "But look, I'm okay. Everything is fine. Sure, I have indestructible 70-foot hair, but I'm almost used to that by now." Her father sighed and stood up. "Rapunzel." She winced, waiting for his reprimand. "I love you." She looked up to him in surprise, and he continued. "It's just like I told you this morning, I worry about you. I couldn't handle losing you again. When I lost you the first time, a real part of me died. And you sneaking out like that and leaving, it's dangerous. What if you hadn't come back? What if you had gotten hurt out there, Rapunzel? I just can't risk that." The blonde princess lowered her head in shame. "I know," he sighed. "Rapunzel, as king, and your father, I forbid you to leave Corona walls without my consent." She looked up in shock. "But father," he stood firm. "Rapunzel, I can't risk losing you again. Please, just respect this." She frowned and spun around, running out of the throne room, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. She passed her mother on the way out, who simply looked at the two with a wistful look. Her father sat on his throne and hung his head. Later that night, as she painted in her book, there was a knock on the door. She closed the journal and turned her head. "Come in." The door opened slowly, and Izuku walked in, holding a small cup of tea in his hands and a cupcake. He gave her a small smile. "Hey, Rapunzel, I figured I'd find you here." She giggled a little. "Well, it is my room, so—" He shared the chuckle and set the things down and sat beside her. "So, I had a bit of a talk with your dad." She frowned a little and sipped the tea. "Yeah, he forbid me from exiting the kingdom walls without his consent. But I want to see the world so bad. Even my mom encouraged me to. I thought things were going so well, we never should have snuck out." Izuku sighed placing his hand on hers. Rapunzel, no matter what happens, I'm going to stay by your side. It may look bleak right now, but I know you. You're never one to succumb to the bad in a situation. If being optimistic means thinking the glass is half full, then yours is overflowing. Maybe he'll change his mind one day. But in the meantime, how about we just make the most of what we have? She sniffed a bit and sighed. You're right. I wouldn't trade what I have for the world. But it's not going to stop my yearn for adventure. Izuku smiled. I know it won't, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Besides, he can't keep you here forever. I'm sure that he'll give in eventually. We'll just have to prove it to him. Together, he cupped her face in her hand and gave her a small peck. She smiled and nodded. Together, after a few more minutes, Izuku rose and went back to his own room, leaving Rapunzel on her own. She stood up and walked out on her balcony, letting the night breeze flow through her long hair. She smiled, looking out onto the horizon. Someday, I'll get to see what the world out there holds. But for now, we'll just take it slow. She walked back into her room and went to bed. Toga Himiko giggled in the castle dungeon, watching Lady Kane pace around. I can't believe we got so easily captured. The plan was flawless. Well, maybe next time you should put up more of a fight. The pirate woman whipped around on her cellmate. You shut your mouth. I don't want to hear a singe word from you. You hardly did anything. She went back to pacing, and Toga continued to giggle. She rolled a small vial of BLD between her fingers, giving it a sadistic look. Oh, I did more than you think. Rapunzel giggled as she ran through the castle halls, searching for Pascal. A game of hide-and-seek always made for a pick-me-up, and after the crazy couple of days she had, she could really use a pick-me-up. Oh, Pascal. She looked around and noticed something a little out of place. A golden chameleon standing in place of a small statue on one of the shelves that lined the halls. A devious grin overtook her face, and she got closer to it. Found you. Pascal sighed and changed back to normal. Rapunzel offered him her hand to crawl up, and he quickly made his way up her arm, perching on her shoulder. When she turned around, she noticed her parents were standing there, talking with Izuku. There's not been any other suspicious activity. I've talked with the captain, and we're doubling down on security, just as you asked, Your Majesty. The king nodded. Good. Can't have anyone coming in and stealing Rapunzel from us. She smiled and gave her father and mother a hug, and Izuku a peck on the cheek. Good morning, everyone. They smiled and waved. Good morning, Rapunzel. She giggled and went back to her room, pushing her doors open and bounding in. However, the sight of a familiar hooded figure standing across the room from her made the young princess freeze in her tracks. The figure turned around and lowered their hood, revealing themselves as Godel. Oh, hello, Rapunzel. I hope you didn't forget about your mother, dearie. Rapunzel took a step back, frozen in shock and fear. Why, you're not my mother. My real parents are just out there. And Izuku, you don't have any power over me here. She giggled. Oh, dearie, there won't be a problem. When she said that, the door opened and a couple of bodies hit the floor. Tied together were her mother and father, both gagged so they couldn't speak. However, laying beside them, and bleeding heavily from a large stab wound, was Izuku. Rapunzel felt her heart seize in fear, and she dropped to her knees beside her. Izuku. He made a few gurgling noises, and his eyes went in and out of focus. Isn't he just adorable? The girl looked up from her dying boyfriend and saw Toga Himiko twirling her knife between her fingers and walking over to stand beside Mother Godel. Rapunzel growled, What have you done? The older woman smiled and spoke with a sickly sweet tone. Oh, dearest, now that your hair is back, we can start over. You can come back with me. This young lady can have that boy, and we can pretend that this whole ordeal never even happened. So what do you say? She extended her hand out, and the room was suddenly engulfed by the black rocks that had chased them the night they had snuck out. Surrounding Rapunzel, and bathing the room in an eerie black-blue glow, the rocks reflected the image of Godel. You can never be rid of me, Rapunzel. No matter what, I'll always haunt your memory, and you'll never wake up. Rapunzel shot awake, her hair suspended in mid-air around her. She was sweating profusely, and standing over her bed was a concerned-looking Cassandra. Shortly after, Izuku came through the door, looking for the danger. I heard the commotion. What's going on? Rapunzel sighed, and her hair fell to the floor. Her handmaiden and boyfriend both looked at each other before turning back to the princess. Cassandra frowned. Bad dream, Raps? The princess nodded. Evidently, the stress from what happened at her coronation the week prior had gotten to her. She hadn't had a nightmare like that in months. The black-haired girl sat down beside her. Which was at this time? Tower, haircut, or a crazy mom? Rapunzel frowned. All of them, with a few newcomers. Cassandra's eyes widened a bit, and she whistled. Sounds like a doozy. Want to talk about it? Izuku had also come in and sat down beside her, and he placed his hand on hers, offering a warm smile. She sighed and described the dream to them. Cass nodded. I was right, that is a doozy. Izuku took the reins of the conversation, grabbing both of Rapunzel's hands as he did so. I've had nightmares in the past, and sometimes they feel so real. I can't tell you how many things I've seen go horribly wrong in my dreams. But the important thing to remember, Rapunzel, is that it's behind you now. These things, these horrible what-if scenarios are just what-ifs. Godel is gone, and I'm right here. And no matter what may come, you've got Cass and me to help you. You'll never be alone again. He gave her his famous million-watt smile, and she returned it, wrapping both him and Cassandra in a hug. The black-haired handmaiden grunted and rolled her eyes, but accepted anyway, a smile on her face. When she let them go, Izuku gave her a peck on the cheek. I'll be back later to see you. I'm about to go on my morning patrol. Cassandra, you've got it from here. The daughter of the captain nodded, scoffing under her breath. Yeah, don't worry. I'll take care of Raps. He gave her a smile and left in a few hops, and she rolled her eyes in response. That guy is such a shameless show-off. Rapunzel giggled a little. He doesn't mean anything by it. You know he doesn't. Cassandra groaned and began to help Rapunzel get ready for the day. I'm telling you, Rapunzel, one of these days I'm going to get the drop on him and prove he's got a mean side. You'll see, you'll all see. The princess chuckled and then sighed, thinking back on her dream for a split second. Cassandra didn't look up from brushing her hair. I know that sigh. Thinking of a dream again. She nodded and sighed again. I don't know, Cass. It just seems like there's more to that dream than what I think. We got to get this hair figured out, otherwise I feel like something bad is going to happen. Cass tied Rapunzel's hair up and spun her around to look at her. Okay, look, I have an idea. The princess gave her a curious look. I'm listening. The handmaiden sat down beside Rapunzel, looking around to see if they were being eavesdropped on. I know a guy that might be able to help. His name is Varian, and he's some kind of wizard. You and I could go out and scope him out. Maybe he can help us with your hair. Stars danced in Rapunzel's eyes as she shook with excitement. A wizard, like pointy hat, staff-wielding, cast spells kind of wizard. Cass shook her head. Not like that, Raps. Not a lot is known about this guy. Mostly just rumors, but what I do know is that he's potentially dangerous. The blonde frowned, knowing what Cass was implying. But he could be our only hope. The black-haired girl nodded, and Rapunzel sighed, before a determined look overtook her face. All right, let's go check out this Varian guy then. Cassandra grinned, and they went into the castle to prepare. Izuku watched the city, perched on top one of the castle's towers for a high vantage point. He scanned alleyways and watched as the guards made their rounds. He held a small notebook in his hands, jotting things down about the city that he could use later in his report. He was glad things seemed to be mostly peaceful. When word got out that a group of high-ranking criminals had snuck into the princess's coronation and caused a scene, other criminals had gotten a little bolder. Being out earlier in the day, being more obvious and open. Within the last week, Izuku had helped capture at least 4 different thieves. He sighed. These guys would use any and all excuses to commit crime. It almost reminded him of when All Might had retired. He frowned a little, thinking about his previous mentor. Before that thought could go anywhere, he noticed Rapunzel's horse, Fidela, riding out of town, carrying 2 riders on her back. At first, he thought she might be getting stolen, but then he recognized that one of the riders wasn't wearing any shoes. Where are they headed? He debated it for a moment before he gave in and made his way down to the front gate. Stan and Pete were both standing duty, and he greeted them. You guys keep an eye on Section 6. There's a new merchant stand there, so it's most likely to get hit today. I'm going out for a little while." Before they could say anything, Izuku was already gone. Stan looked over to Pete. "He is fast, isn't he?" The other guard scoffed. "I bet I could beat him in a foot race if he didn't use that power of his." Stan rolled his eyes. "You couldn't beat anyone in a foot race, even if they were standing still." Pete held a hand to his chest. "That was one time, and I told you I tripped." Cassandra and Rapunzel rode together to where the handmaiden said that Varian lived. When they stopped in front of an old, dilapidated tower on the outskirts of a small village, Rapunzel gulped. "Cass, you didn't tell me that this was the kind of place that I want to say goodbye to all of my loved ones before I left." The girl shrugged. "I'm gonna be honest here. I wasn't really made aware of this myself." She pushed open the large door in front of them, showing nothing but darkness, the cold stone floor of the building only being somewhat visible from the light that shone through the open doorway. Cass smiled at Rapunzel. "All right, seems nice enough." They ventured into the darkness, trying to make their way around in the dense fog. "Man, either there's a fire somewhere, or this guy has a serious flair for dramatics." Rapunzel giggled nervously. "Well, it's just fog, so it's fine." As they made their way forward, Cassandra stepped on a tripwire, setting off a series of chemical reactions and filling a small glass ball full of purple liquid before launching at their feet. The ball busted, and their feet were covered in a sticky substance that they were unable to escape from. Suddenly, a voice boomed from in front of them, causing them to shift their focus away from their sticky situation. "Who dares disturb me?" Rapunzel gulped and stared forward at the imposing figure, and Cassandra got on guard. The figure stopped for a moment before pulling the hood off their head, revealing a boy that couldn't be any older than 14. Actually, that came out wrong. "Hi, I'm Varian. What's up?" The blonde princess stared at the boy that was awkwardly twiddling his thumbs in front of her and wondered about the choices that she had made in her life to get to this exact moment. Hi, I'm Princess Rapunzel, and this is my friend Cassandra." The boy chuckled. "Oh, I know who you are, Princess. I guess I meant more, what do you need? What brings you here? What can I do for you? You know, that sort of thing." The blonde princess stared at her friend, who simply shrugged. "Well, I guess you could help us out of this goop stuff first." He jumped at the mention and quickly rushed over. He poured a vial of chemical onto the pink stuff, and it dissolved away, freeing the two young ladies. He grinned sheepishly. We have a bit of an animal problem. And by we, I mean me. This is a system I designed to deal with them safely and humanely. Pretty cool, huh?" Rapunzel stared at all the vials and flasks surrounding the room. "So, you're not a wizard? More of a scientist?" His eyes seemed to light up. "Yeah, an alchemist. I'm glad you recognized that." She giggled. "Well, I know a little bit about some basic stuff. I'm big on reading." He nodded, and Cassandra cleared her throat, reminding Rapunzel why they were there in the first place. She snapped her fingers. "Oh yeah, Varian, so I was wondering. I'm in a bit of a hairy situation." She turned to give a full view of all her hair, and Varian's eyes widened for a moment. Yeah. Okay, I've got some tools. Let's see what I can do." Izuku hopped through the forest, following the hoof trails of Fidela. He probably could have caught up with them, but he was curious to see where they were going, and all his hero training and work had taught him that sometimes a loose follow was the best approach. Before long, he had passed the ugly duckling and more towards the kingdom wall. Maybe they were going to the site of the flower to do some research? Probably not, though, because of those black rocks that chased them. Maybe they were headed to Rapunzel's tower to get something, or for some peace of mind. Izuku thought they had gotten everything from there, but he could always be wrong. That is, until he noticed that the hoof trail avoided the area where the tower was by a relatively large margin. He frowned. There was a town right at the castle walls. He remembered from looking at a map of the kingdom. Perhaps they had headed there to get something or someone. He had no idea. Maybe it was just a barefoot thief. He doubted, though. Going around with no shoes on seemed pretty counterintuitive. Also, something that was very much a Rapunzel thing. Soon, he had emerged out of the forest and near the old side of Old Corona. Fidela was standing nearby, outside of an especially old-looking building. He approached her. and gave her a pat. "Hey, girl." She whinnied at the sight of him and seemed to look at him curiously. He gave a sheepish smile. "Well, I saw Rapunzel leave, and I got curious." She gave him a deadpan look, and he blushed. Usually he wasn't one for snooping. Okay, maybe that wasn't entirely true, but he liked to be around. "I know Rapunzel can handle herself, but I like to be around just in case. Plus, she's a lot like me, in the sense that she's a magnet for trouble." Fidela just snorted and went back to grazing. Izuku chuckled and went over to the building, looking for a good way in. Varian spun out of the way to avoid the blade flying off of his saw, and frowned. "You're right, this stuff is definitely indestructible. But I may have a solution." Rapunzel smiled, her eyes lighting up in excitement. "What is it?" He began gathering things together and walking over to a large machine in the middle of the room. "Well, if we can figure out the exact chemical and physical properties of your hair, we may be able to figure out a chemical that can weaken your hair enough to cut, or something along those lines." He mumbled the last part, so the other two didn't hear, and Rapunzel smiled, a little nervous at the sight of the imposing machine. "Well, it's worth a shot, so let's do it." He nodded and got her strapped in and stepped back to the setting levers. "All right, so there might be a little bit of discomfort. It shouldn't be too bad, though." The words weren't reassuring, but Rapunzel was never known to be any kind of quitter. She steeled herself, a look of determination taking over her features. "All right, let's do it." He pulled a lever, and the machine began to twist Rapunzel around, pulling her hair in all different sorts of directions. Cassandra winced at the machine, definitely glad that it wasn't her in Rapunzel's position. The machine slowed to a stop, and Rapunzel sighed in relief. "Oh, that wasn't so bad." Varian frowned a little, tapping his fingers together. "Actually, that was only test one." Rapunzel gave him a strange look. "Out of..." He smiled nervously. 88. She was once again questioning her life choices. Maybe she should have just took a nap instead of sneaking out. She sighed. "Well, then let's do this as fast as possible then." He nodded and started the process of running through the different tests. As he walked around the tower, Izuku could hear a machine whirring from inside. That made him even more curious. Machine technology wasn't super common around here at this time. There were a few steam engines and such, but to be here of all places was definitely strange. He walked up to a window and peeked through it, seeing a saw blade burning up on Rapunzel's hair. "Wait, what?" He looked closer and noticed that she was strapped to a strange machine that was doing several things to her hair. Cassandra stood watching, and there was another, younger boy operating the machine. Out of all the things he expected, this wasn't one of them. He gauged the size of the window, deeming it too small to go through, and just decided to go through the front door. Fidela was peacefully grazing, and he entered the dimly lit building. He noticed a tripwire and carefully stepped over it and silently made his way into the room where they all were. He waited a moment, and the machine stopped, so he decided it was an opportune time to speak up. "Hey, what's going on?" They all jumped in surprise, Rapunzel giving him a confused look. "Izuku, what are you doing here?" He blushed. I noticed you leaving, and I decided to follow." Cassandra frowned, hand on her hip. "We can handle ourselves, lover boy. We don't need you to shadow our every movement." He grinned sheepishly. Actually, I mostly just followed out of curiosity. What's going on?" The boy walked up to him, an amazed look on his face. "You're Izuku Midoryia?" He looked down at the younger boy and nodded. "I am." "You are?" He grinned. "I'm Varian, sir, and I'm a huge fan. We've heard about your amazing crime fighting all the way out here in Old Corona, and needless to say, we're all super impressed. I mean, it's not every day that a single man can cut the crime rate in Corona down by almost 80%. Cassandra rolled her eyes and crossed her arms, and Izuku blushed. Well, that's just part of the job. You know, being a hero and all that." It was a bit of a slip of the tongue, and Izuku remembered that his official title wasn't pro-hero anymore. That might have sounded a bit braggadocious. Or, well, a guard might be more accurate. Varian shook his head. "No, I think heroes sound great. Look, someone has even written a short story about your escapades." He pulled up a thin book titled The Great Izuku Midoryia and the teen blushed. It probably wasn't accurate at all, but it was definitely flattering. He'd like to shift everyone's attention, though. That's nice and all, and I'll have to definitely give that a read later. But I'm more curious about what all this is. He gestured to the machine that his girlfriend was strapped to, and this time, said girlfriend spoke up. We're testing my hair to see if we can't get it all chopped off and back to normal. He walked up to the machine. Ah, I see. Well, all this stuff is definitely impressive. Pretty advanced stuff. How do you power it? Varian's eyes sparkled at being asked about his machine. Well, it uses a mix of a couple different chemicals that I've discovered. Mostly, it's heat and pressure-based, kind of like a steam engine, but it doesn't require nearly as much power. Izuku nodded. Very creative, easily 50 or 60 years ahead of its time. He made a quick note to see what Varian knew about atomic structure and similar things later, and looked over to Rapunzel. I'm guessing there's still a few more tests to run? She nodded. Only 7 more, and then we can get results. Izuku nodded, and Varian snapped. Oh, before I forget, I gotta get the spectrogram. That's the only way I can read the results. It's in one of my storage buildings. Anyone want to come with? Izuku volunteered, and Cassandra groaned when they left. Oh my goodness, they are such huge nerds. Rapunzel giggled. It's so cute to watch Izuku nerd out like that. The handmaiden rolled her eyes and saw down, spinning her sword in her hands. Varian opened up the building and grabbed the spectrogram. They were about to head back when a boy stopped them. Oh, actually, let's make a quick detour. I want to show you something really quick. He set the spectrogram down and opened a trapdoor, leading down some dimly lit tunnels. Soon, they came into a room with a huge engine in the center. Izuku whistled. That's definitely a big one. What's it for? Varian smiled and tapped it gently. There's 4 of these bad boys under the town. I'm working trying to get everyone heated running water, which I can do with this. He held up a vial of red liquid. This is a chemical I discovered. It's really cool. With just a little drop. He tipped the vial into the machine, and Izuku watched as the temperature and pressure valves began to rise significantly. I can heat a solid 20,000 gallons of water. Izuku was impressed. This was pretty advanced stuff for the time, he knew. Only the richest people had hot running water, and for this kid to bring it to his whole town was very noble. That's awesome. What sort of pressure systems do you have in place? And safety features? He smiled. I have a handful of bleed-off valves and a shut-off valve if things get too hairy. I am a little accident-prone, but according to my calculations, there's only a 5% system failure rate. Here, I have the blueprints over here if you want to look. He brought him over to a table and rolled out the prints for the entire machine. Izuku studied them for a moment and gave a handful of suggestions. I definitely think you should increase to a bigger pipe. You don't want pressure to be too high. I have some experience with that. Also, that chemical seems powerful, so I think some more bracing around the chemical cage here, so that there aren't any punctures into the reservoir would be good. Varian nodded, stars in his eyes. That's genius. Mr. Izuku, you're amazing. Izuku blushed. Don't worry about it. Let's get back to Rapunzel and get her those results. The boy nodded. As they walked, he looked over to Izuku. You know, I haven't named that compound yet. I was thinking something like Izukium or maybe Midorium. What do you think? Izuku blushed. Well, most scientists name stuff after themselves. Maybe something like Verolium. The boy nodded, finger tapping his chin. I'll have to think more on it. All right, let's see if we can't get these results set up. Cassandra groaned. Finally, what took you two so long? Izuku grinned sheepishly. Well, Varian was showing me one of his inventions. I was giving him some pointers. Rapunzel spoke up, although she was currently upside down. Oh, what was it? She got spun back around, and Izuku smiled. Well, he's got these huge water tanks underground, and he's trying to supply the whole town with running water. Rapunzel's eyes danced in amazement, and even Cassandra seemed impressed. Whoa, that's awesome. Varian blushed. Yeah, but we should keep it on the down low. It's kind of a surprise. They shrugged and nodded. Okay, we won't say anything. He smiled and continued to run the tests. There were about 2 tests left when the ground rumbled. Izuku looked over to Varian, who had gone white. What was that? The boy looked around frantically before grabbing a wrench. Ah, Well, it sounded like it might be my machine. I'm gonna go bleed off some pressure. You guys stay here. Izuku frowned as the boy sped off. That might not be good. The ground rumbled again, and Cassandra stood up. Guys, I don't know if we should be sticking around for this. Rapunzel was being shaken up and down. DD, WWW or Y. VA Vivarians go TT, I it. There was another rumble, this time much more violent, and steam began to spew out of the ground. Pieces of ground were being launched into the sky, and the older buildings began to crumble. Izuku glowed with one for all, and began to get Rapunzel out of the machine, but she cried out in protest. Hold on, there's only one more test. He frowned. Cassandra, do you think you can get her out before this place comes down? I need to find Varian. She nodded, and he hopped out of the building, searching for the younger boy. He soon found him running across town, about to shut the other three off. A huge pipe flew through the air, and Izuku zipped towards him and moved him out the way. Okay, Varian, where do we need to go? He frowned. The other three are centralized over there. I have a maintenance hatch close by. Izuku hopped forward with one for all, trying to make it to the machines in time, but they burst before they could reach them. Steam and machine parts flew in the air, narrowly missing people and people's houses. Izuku moved people to safety, only a green blur visible as he zipped through town. Once everyone had been grabbed, he made his way back to the tower, but it collapsed as he got closer. A flash of gold appeared, and Rapunzel and Cassandra stood amidst the wreckage, unscathed. Izuku breathed a sigh of relief. You two okay? Rapunzel nodded. We're fine. How's the rest of the town? Izuku nodded. They're safe now. What about the results? Cassandra held them up. They're right here. The greenette nodded, and Varian walked over to them, worried. You're all okay? Thank goodness. I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. I messed everything up again. Izuku frowned. Varian, what happened down there? He blushed. I knocked over the chemical. It sent the entire machine into overdrive, and it was just too much for it to handle. When it destabilized, the rest of them did as well. I'm just glad that they only blew gaskets and such. The entire town could have been destroyed had they burst completely. Rapunzel frowned and looked over to Cassandra, who seemed to be giving the kid a look of pity. He was only trying to help people. My dad is right. I really need to stop messing with this stuff. Izuku sighed and put a hand on the younger boy's shoulder. That's not true. What you were doing down there, it's super impressive. And I know the people of Old Corona would love it. Accidents happen, Varian. It's what you do about them to fix them that determines your strength. Varian looked at the older boy and nodded. You're right. Next time, I'll get it right. I'll just go over my designs, make them 10 times more careful, account for every situation I can. Izuku chuckled. Remind me to tell you about some of the cool stuff I know. He nodded, and he turned to Cassandra. Here, let me read those results. The black-haired handmaiden handed him the paper, and he studied it closely for a couple of seconds before looking at it, bewildered. Rapunzel gave him a concerned look. What is it? Varian opened his mouth to speak before shutting it and getting another look at the results. Well, according to this, it's just normal hair. Nothing weird about it. Just hair. They all looked baffled before Rapunzel snapped. Well, I guess that does make sense. That was testing its chemical and physical properties, and while it's not acting like normal hair, it is magical. Varian wrinkled his nose at the mention of magic. I don't know about all of that. Izuku chuckled. Trust me, I've seen it. The hair stuff is definitely magical. He didn't seem totally convinced, but he kept quiet about it for now. He grinned sheepishly and rubbed the back of his neck. Well, sorry about wasting all of your time. Rapunzel shook her head. You didn't, Varian. Any information about my hair is valuable to us. Plus, it was really nice to meet you. The boy blushed. Likewise, Princess. Izuku grinned and put his arm around Rapunzel. Well, I think we should head back to the castle before anyone thinks we ran off again. Rapunzel nodded, and she and Cassandra mounted Fidela once again, and Izuku flared up one for all. They waved to Varian as they left, and the younger boy waved back. Then he headed back to the remnants of his lab to see if there was anything he could salvage. He had water tanks to fix, But unbeknownst to them all, a handful of familiar black rocks began to sprout up on the inside of the corona walls. They shone eerily, slowly making their ways inland. Rapunzel felt a chill run down her spine as she laid in her bed, settling down for the night. Despite all the events of the day, she still had a strange feeling, something she couldn't quite place. The sense of foreboding sat on the back of her mind, but she shut her eyes and snuggled tighter in her cover. She drifted off into a dreamless sleep. The Snuggly Duckling was a popular site for visiting ruffians and thugs, an asylum of sorts for the crude and rude for as long as the place had been open. However, most of the time, the patrons of the pub all knew each other, or at least knew of each other. So, when a hooded figure walked in and simply sat at the bar, requesting water, they all gave strange looks of inquisition. The bartender himself had a deadpan expression on his face, wiping the inside of the cup he was holding. "Look, fella, if you want water, there's a stream a little ways from here. Good clean water. But here we serve drinks." There was a moment of silence before the figure slammed a hand onto the counter. "I said that I wanted a dim-in water, barkeep. You gotta have some of the stuff laying around in here somewhere. I've been walking a while, and I'm tired." The man frowned, and all the ruffians now looked towards the stranger at the bar, ready to teach the punk a lesson at a moment's notice. "Look, kid, I get it, but don't come into my bar causing trouble and raising hell. We may be thugs, but at least we have manners." The figure snickered from under his hood. "Look, just give me some water, and I won't cause any trouble. Not like a bunch of low-lives like yourselves could handle me anyway." The entire bar was growling at this point, but the bartender just sighed and poured the hooded figure some water from a bottle he had under the counter. The hooded person raised the glass in appreciation and began to down it, sighing in satisfaction as he slammed the glass back onto the counter. "Now, barkeep, I got a question. You know how to get to the city from here?" The tender gave him a skeptical look. "Why do you want to know?" The other man held up a piece of paper, showing a flyer for a fighting competition that was taking place in the castle, advertising a cash prize, as well as a favor from the king, within reason, of course. The barkeep raised his eyebrow. "You want to fight in the competition?" One of the other patrons snorted. "Yeah, like a scrawny little kid, like you could do any real damage." Before anything could be said, the hooded figure simply stood and turned to the speaker, his face hidden by his hood, save for a savage grin stretching across the bottom of his face. "You want to put your life on it, criminal?" The ensuing fight that broke out made the bartender sigh in annoyance. It was expensive getting all these chairs and tables replaced every month. When the hooded figure was all that was left standing among the ruffians, the barkeep pointed. "The castle's that way. Just follow the road, and you can't miss it. It's pretty much a straight shot from here." The man grinned under his hood. "Thanks, barkeep. And here, for your troubles." He tossed a bag onto the counter, slap full of golden coins. The guy must have been some kind of mercenary or something. There was no other way to explain. As he walked out of the bar, the tender called out to him. "Wait, kid, what's your name?" The hooded figure stopped for a moment, before turning to the man behind the counter and grinned. "Don't worry about it, old man. You'll find out soon enough." With those final words, the figure walked out of the bar, and the bartender began to count his money. Rapunzel gave a curious look at Cassandra, who was slashing away at a training dummy. "So you're joining the competition too? Are you trying to win the money?" The black-haired handmaiden stopped for a moment, wiping the sweat from her brow. "No, not really. I'm more in it for the favor." The blonde princess tilted her head in confusion. "Well, I'm the princess, Cass. Whatever it is you want, I'm sure we could get it for you." The girl grit her teeth at the idea, but Rapunzel didn't seem to notice. "No, I need to do this on my own." The blonde simply shrugged, relenting her questioning as her friend continued to train. Suddenly, a green blur appeared, and the grinning form of Izuku Midoryia appeared before the two. Rapunzel jumped up, enveloping the green-haired teen in a hug, before giving him a kiss. Cass, who had initially been startled by the sudden appearance. She rolled her eyes, before continuing to train. Izuku set Rapunzel down, and switched attention to Cassandra. "Oh, hey Cassandra, training for the competition?" The girl growled and simply began to slash the dummy faster. Izuku nodded and grinned. Well, keep at it. I've actually been thinking about joining myself. It seems like it could be a lot of fun. At his words, Cassandra cut the dummy's head smooth off and was huffing between being tired as well as aggravated. Izuku gave her a thumbs up. Wow, impressive. She leveled the sword at the messy-haired hero. Don't you dare ruin this for me too, Izuku Midoryia. The teen held his hands up in surprise before she embedded the sword in the dirt and stormed away to get another dummy. Izuku frowned at the exchange, as did Rapunzel, who gazed at the beheaded dummy with trepidation. Maybe you should talk to her. I don't know why she doesn't like you so much. Izuku rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Me neither, but I can't say that I'm not used to it. The blonde princess looked up to him. That's right, you were picked on a lot as a kid. I remember you telling me that. It's a little different with Cass, though. She doesn't act that way with anyone else. The hero shrugged. Well, some people just don't like you. No matter what you do, all you can do is respect their choice. Rapunzel nodded, not having thought about it before. She hadn't met anyone that didn't really like her yet, so she didn't really know. She looked back over to her boyfriend. Are you still want to join the fighting competition? He shrugged. I don't know. If Cassandra's really that invested, maybe I shouldn't. But then again, maybe I can talk to her and we can resolve things. I didn't plan on using my quirk, though. Rapunzel nodded. Well, if you did, you'd pretty much wipe out the entire competition with no sweat. The teen blushed. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. I don't really know how to use any of those weapons, so I just planned on doing it the old-fashioned way. He held up his fists, and Rapunzel giggled. The green-haired hero pulled out a pocket watch and gave the princess a peck on the lips. I'll see you later, Rapunzel. I've got to go get my report. She smiled. I'm going to go talk to Cass. He nodded and hopped away, and the princess went in the direction to where her friend was. Cassandra sharpened her sword angrier than she had in a while. That damn poster child thought this competition was just some fun little get-together. He had no idea what she had writing on this. She had to win this and prove that she'd be an asset to the guard. With him parading around, she'd never get the chance. She growled and began to press the whetstone harder into the blade when she heard someone enter her room. She looked over and noticed Rapunzel had walked in, a smile on her face. Cass's eyes softened, and she set the stone down. What's up, Raps? The princess to a seat on the bed across from her, giving her a friendly smile. I just came to check on you. You left pretty heated after all. The girl scoffed. Yeah, well, that boyfriend of yours kind of ticked me off. I mean, why does he even need to join? The blonde giggled. Well, if it gives you any consolation, he says he's going to fight with a handicap. No powers, no weapons. The black-haired handmaiden growled at the insinuation. So he thinks he's that much better than me? He's such a shameless show-off. Rapunzel giggled. Cass, I don't think that's it at all. Izuku's a really nice guy. I think he wants to challenge himself more than anything. A lot of really good fighters from all over the country are going to be there, so what better time to see what you can do without any assistance? The handmaiden grumbled, but the blonde had a point. Then I'll show him that he's not nearly as good as he thinks he is. The determined look on Cassandra's face made the blonde smile widely. That's a great idea, Cass. Maybe you can finally see that he doesn't think he's better than you. Cass's anger seemed to cool down, and she gave Rapunzel a sideways glance. Yeah, we'll see. Or maybe I'll finally prove that I was right, and you were wrong. That the poster boy isn't as innocent as you thought. They chuckled with each other, and Rapunzel sighed. Well, I'm going to go paint something, I think. Would you like to be my model? Cassandra shrugged. I don't have much of a choice. You just begged me until I said yes. The princess smiled. You know me so well, Cass. The daughter of the captain shrugged. I've spent the last 6 months almost exclusively hanging out with you. I like to think so. The two chuckled and headed up to Rapunzel's room, giving Cass a break from training. That weekend, and tents had been set up around the guard training grounds, where a makeshift arena had been set up for the competitors. Cassandra strapped her armor on and put her swords and daggers in her belt. She looked in the mirror she had set up, looking to see if anything was out of place, when a familiar head of messy green hair came into view. The black-haired woman groaned and turned to see a sheepish-looking Izuku Midoryia. What do you want? The hero stuck his hand out for her to shake. She gave him a deadpanned look, but he didn't relent so she rolled her eyes and grabbed his hand for a shake. He gave her a determined look. I just wanted to say, good luck today. I know this is important to you. Also, I won't go easy on you just because you're my friend. If you want to win that badly, show me. With those words, he let go of her head, flashed her a smile, and left her tent. She was at a loss for words at his declaration of war, but a feral smile started to slowly cross her face. If he wanted her to show him, then she'd show him all right. Izuku had a nostalgic feeling when it was announced that it was going to be a tournament-style fight, with the contestants facing in rounds, where the winners progressed to the next round until there was no one left. Just like a sports festival that UA had. He scanned the crowd of contestants, sizing up his potential opponents. He noticed that there was one that was wearing a long cowl, surprising the hero. Most of the others were dressed pretty flashy, like they were trying to be recognized. He decided that he'd keep an eye on them and make sure that they weren't up to anything nefarious. He hoped not. He wanted to enjoy today, and if there was some sort of incident, he'd hate for any of the audience to be endangered. His thoughts were cut short when the king stepped forward and addressed the crowd. My subjects, today we will witness some of the greatest fighters in all of Corona and beyond. They will face off in a series of one-on-one battles until there is only one victor. This victory will be the winner of a monetary prize, as well as a reasonable favor from me. The crowd began to cheer at the king's words, and he smiled and waved. Now, will the first combatants please enter the arena? The first battle was between Cassandra and a huge hulking mass of a man. Her opponent was silent, simply staring down the much smaller woman, who confidently held her sword out. He made the first move, and Cassandra grinned. The battle was almost immediately over. Unable to respond quickly enough to the nimble handmaiden, he couldn't stop himself once she had ducked out of the way and tripped him, sending him careening to the ground. She hopped onto his back and knocked him out with the pommel of her sword, giving her the quick and decisive victory. She grinned and held her hands up in victory. Is that the best you've got? I hope all of you aren't pushovers like this. Izuku chuckled when she looked directly at him from the stands. He must have riled her up a little when he declared war on her earlier. It was effective after all then. She reminded him so much of his oldest friend, it was kind of scary. Like Kachan followed him around wherever he went. He chuckled. He couldn't wait to fight her later. Unbeknownst to Izuku, however, the hooded figure from before watched the black-haired woman's declaration with a savage grin. Now, that's what I like to hear. The next few fights weren't very interesting, most of the people simply fumbling around the arena until one of them were knocked out, Cassandra noted. Hardly any skill or finesse, similar to how her opponent was. There were a few exceptions, of course. One man that had 2 metal legs, Izuku, of course, a fancy-looking nobleman wielding a rapier, and a hooded figure that had yet to show themselves. Cassandra eyed the said figure with trepidation. Most people didn't just wear cloaks and hoods all the time. She figured the green-haired poster boy noticed them as well and was also keeping an eye on him. It seemed like the hooded figure was keeping just as much of an eye on Izuku as well, though. Rapunzel cheered as she watched Izuku gracefully evade a man that was coming at him with a short sword and shield. Said combatant was getting angrier by the second and sloppier by proxy, something that Izuku had deftly taken advantage of. She wasn't sure about watching at first, but she was amazed by the number of cool fighters there were. It almost made her want to join herself. But she knew better, remembering when her and Cassandra had first met and became friends. For now, she'd just stick to cheering for her friends from the sidelines. The fights went by relatively quickly, and ultimately, all that were left were Izuku Cassandra, the man with the metal legs who called himself Captain Gilligan, and the hooded figure that had been tearing through the other combatants like butter. Rapunzel watched with rapt attention as her best friend walked out onto the arena, facing the tall man with metal legs. Cassandra was beginning to tire, and she knew it. Luckily, there was going to be a break between this round and the next, giving her an opportunity to regain some of her lost strength. She was positive that she'd be facing Izuku in the last round, and as much as she hated to admit it, she knew that she'd have to give everything she had to defeat the man, even if he was holding back significantly. She looked at the captain, who was giving her a large grin. Well, "Hi there, little lady. Say, don't hold back on old Captain Gilligan, won't ye? I love me a good scrap, after all. I'd say I have me work cut out for me." He let out a hearty laugh, and Cassandra grinned, lowering herself into a fighting stance. "No problem there, old man." They said nothing else, instead choosing to engage in battle. Similarly to her previous battles, Cassandra allowed her opponent to make the opening move. The sailor man charged forward, delivering a wicked overhead blow to the girl. Cassandra parried the attack, sending a shock up her arm. The man was strong, more so than she was. However, skill mattered more here. She hopped back quickly, putting a bit of distance between her and the sailor, before she charged him herself, delivering a feint to his right, before spinning and striking at his left. There was a clang of metal against metal, and Cassandra felt her arms vibrate from the attack. Captain Gilligan held his left leg up, meeting her sword before she could hit his torso. He gave her a toothy grin, one that she could barely see under his scraggly beard. "Gonna Ave to try harder than that, lass." She grinned as well, and spun around, meeting his sword with her own. Their blades met, and she conceded that the man was far more skilled than what she imagined. She couldn't say she was surprised, of course. He did make it this far in the battle after all. However, no matter how skilled he may be, she had been raised by the captain of the Royal Guard since she was a little girl. She'd mastered her swordplay at this point. Feinting left, and then jabbing her sword into his hilt, she wrenched her sword up, causing his sword to fly out of his hands. Then, with a flash of steel, the blade rested comfortably at his neck. Gilligan chuckled and held his hands up. All right then, lass. I yield." She lowered her sword and sheathed it. Gilligan retrieved his weapon as well and sheathed it. He held his hand out to Cassandra in a show of good sportsmanship. When she accepted, he gave her a wink and a smile. "You're good, lass. Just watch your next fight. Those two are on a different level than you and I." With that, he bid her farewell and walked out of the arena. Her thoughts drifted to what he said. She knew Izuku would be different, but the hooded figure? She knew that they were definitely strong, as well as having fought the entire tournament completely barehanded, just like Izuku had been. Could they defeat the overwhelming force that was the Wonder Boy? Thinking about it, she knew that he was skilled as well as strong. However, his defining strength wasn't being used. He was holding back. Maybe it would be his downfall ultimately. It would definitely be an interesting fight either way. Izuku Midoryia had watched the hooded figure raptly during the entire tournament, just in case they fought in the last round. However, in doing so, he found himself troubled. Their style of fighting had seemed so familiar to him. They acted as an overwhelming diamante force on the battlefield, completely beating down whoever their opponent was. They were clearly well-trained, but the problem was that they were also clearly holding something back, pulling punches just like he was. And by proxy, he had to assume that they knew he was doing the same, as well as analyzing him the same as he them. Everything was so familiar to him, like déjà vu. He carefully thought of how he'd approach the upcoming battle, but was pulled out of his strategizing from a hand on his shoulder. Rapunzel gave him a warm smile. "Don't worry, Izuku, you've got this. Also, you're mumbling." He blushed and gave his girlfriend a determined smile. "Yeah, I guess it's time for me to go out there now." She smiled. "I'll be rooting for you." He nodded and headed out to the battlefield. As he walked out, his opponent sauntered out as well. Without a word being spoken between the two, the hooded figure charged forward, as he had for every other fight, leading his attack with a strong right hook. Strong right hook. Izuku knew the feint was coming before it had. He grabbed his opponent by the hand and swung them around using their own momentum before launching them away. They recovered quickly, sliding away from Izuku on his feet. The hooded figure chuckled. "Looks like you're as annoying as ever, Deku." The hood was thrown off, and Izuku was greeted by a head of spiky blonde hair and a pair of intense red eyes that he never thought he'd see again. "Kachan, it didn't click until just now, but I knew you seemed familiar. How'd you get here?" The boy grinned. "Not important right now. Fight me." He charged forward, and the two continued to brawl. "Come on, Deku. I know you don't want to fight for real with all these people around, but you'd give me a challenge. Don't tell me you've gotten complacent now that you're living it up in the castle." Rapunzel was in complete shock. She was confused at first, but after she heard the conversation, she realized who it was that was facing her boyfriend. His childhood friend from his time, Katsuki Bakugo, the one that had tormented him when he was younger, before finally becoming his rival and one of his closest allies in high school. She was amazed, but she also really hoped he didn't start blowing things up or whatever, like Izuku had mentioned before. Cassandra seemed confused by the reveal, as well as the shift in tone from a serious fight to a light-hearted brawl. Izuku grinned as he punched Kachan in the face, sending him reeling back before the explosive hero returned the favor with an attack of his own. They hadn't sparred in a while, and while Katsuki could be a bit much sometimes, Izuku was glad that he had the chance again. Don't worry, Kachan. You won't beat me today. Even without my power, I can still beat you. The other teen laughed. You're right, Deku. I've gotten stronger since we last fought. They traded blows for a solid 20 minutes before it became clear that they were getting worn down. The fight would have likely ended a while ago had they been using their quirks, but also, there probably wouldn't be an arena left. They had the tendency to get a little carried away, and with Izuku's almost 85% control of One for All, it was likely that they'd even take the castle down in the process. There was no cement toss here to make a new one if it got reduced to dust either, so they just have to do it the old-fashioned way. Izuku knew that Kachan was having as much trouble as he was. He grinned. Time to end this, Kachan. The other teen grunted. Good luck. They charged at each other, and Izuku aimed a kick for his head, while Katsuki prepared to throw the green-haired hero. However, last second, Izuku twisted himself mid-air and hit a solid punch into his explosive rival's solar plexus, effectively knocking him out. He then grabbed him and threw him into the arena wall. The explosive teen groaned and slid down the wall, but didn't rise. King Frederick waited for a moment before holding his hand up. Izuku Midoryia is the winner. He walked over to his friend and offered him a hand up, which the blonde accepted, not without grumbling. Damn, Deku. I'll get you next time. I won't let this happen again. Izuku laughed. Come on, I want you to meet everyone. They walked back into the stands together, where Rapunzel waited with bated breath, and Cassandra gave him a curious glance. Kachan, meet Rapunzel, and her friend Cassandra. The explosive blonde sized the two of them up, turning to Rapunzel first. So, this useless nerd managed to land himself a princess. I bet he SHD himself when you said yes. The princess giggled. Actually, I kissed him first. He just died for me. The blonde raised an eyebrow, to which Izuku grinned sheepishly. Ah, I'll explain it later. Cassandra stood up, sizing up the explosive hero. So, you're friends with the poster child. I didn't think he'd hang around real people. Katsuki let out a sharp laugh. This DMN nerd isn't my friend, just my rival. Don't mix it up, knives. The handmaiden gave him a strange look, while Izuku struggled not to laugh. Kachan, was that a Scott Pilgrim reference? The boy simply scoffed at the green-haired hero, and Cassandra sighed. First it's the goody-goody, now it's the bad boy. She couldn't catch a break. She turned her attention away from the volatile blonde, turning her attention to her soon-to-be opponent. She gave Izuku Midoryia a sharp look. Prepare yourself, poster child. I don't want you to be tired or distracted before we fight. She sauntered away, leaving Izuku to sheepishly grin at her declaration. Katsuki chuckled. You know, I like her. Izuku turned to the spiky-haired teen. Kachan, on a serious note. How'd you get here? The other hero frowned, the air suddenly becoming somber. After that BSDRD, Shigaraki got rid of you. SHD hit the fan. A whole invasion of villains. We had hell holding them off, and as much as I hate it, you were a key player. Plus, that dim-in clockwork guy kept screwing with all our guys. He'd send us back in time over and over, leaving us to repeat the same battle over and over again. Then something weird happened when I decided to take him on one-on-one. It was like his quirk got put into overdrive. Lightning and stuff, and then I end up here. Same as you, apparently. Izuku frowned. Sounds like One for All. Maybe there's still a remnant from that time on Nabu Island. The spiky-haired teen frowned. Well, that's part of the reason I came. We gotta get back. Izuku opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, he was called to the arena. He frowned. We'll talk about it later. He quickly hopped down to the arena and faced a determined-looking Cassandra who was tightly holding her sword and shooting the teen daggers. Izuku lowered himself into a fighting stance. "Okay, Cassandra," he said, "show me how much this means to you." She didn't say a word, simply holding her sword out, waiting for Izuku to come to her. However, the green-haired teen simply stood in place, holding his position. They stood in stalemate for a few moments, before the two began to slowly approach each other, circling slowly. Izuku held a determined look on his face, while Cassandra glared. Then, seemingly tired of waiting, Cassandra made the first move. She struck fast, but Izuku avoided the swipe, knocking her sword away with the flat of his palm, and giving a quick jab to her side. She growled and began to swing faster, leaving Izuku on the defensive as he evaded her attacks. She growled, and Izuku frowned. He flipped backwards, putting distance between the two. As she got closer, he swiped low at her feet, but she jumped over it. She had yet to land a hit on Izuku, but he hadn't gotten a good strike on her either. They were at a stalemate as far as the match was concerned. One of them needed to change the match up, or they'd be doing this until one of them either got tired and sloppy or conceded defeat, something Izuku knew wouldn't happen. So, he decided to change things up. Suddenly, he pushed forward through her defense and grabbed her, spinning her around and throwing her halfway across the arena. She landed HRD on her side and scrambled to get up, but Izuku was already upon her. She had a loose grip on her sword, and Izuku knocked it from her grip. She growled and pulled her other sword out, but it was also knocked from her hands. She scrambled back and hopped up. Izuku paused for a moment, and Cassandra stood up, not daring to make a move to her weapons. She knew she couldn't fight Izuku in hand-to-hand. She may be good, but he was a brawler by trade, so he had the upper hand. Suddenly, she had an idea, and she charged him. He seemed to realize that she had something planned, so he tried to keep her from getting too close. They traded blows for a couple of seconds before Cassandra leaped forward and attached herself to his torso before climbing around to his back. He was surprised at first, but he regained his bearings and tried to throw her off, but he felt a cold glint against his neck, and he sighed. "All right then, I yield." She let go, sliding to the ground from the taller man's back. He turned to her and held out a hand, and the girl had a smug look on her face. "Well, you won, fair and square. Good job, we'll have to do it again sometime." She chuckled. "Well, if you feel like being beat again." The green-haired teen gave a hearty laugh. "Well, you won't get me with the same trick twice, so you better get creative." She nodded, knowing that it had been much closer than she would have liked. Hell, that last move probably shouldn't have even worked. But it was over now, and she had won the competition. She had a favor to ask of the king. When Izuku sat Bakugo down and told him that he had been searching the library for a way home, but had yet to find anything, the explosive teen hadn't been happy about it. "Damned useless Deku. If you weren't so busy with that princess, you would have found something by now." Izuku frowned. That was another problem that he was going to have to address at some point. If they did find a way home, would he go? He had a responsibility, as the ninth holder of One for All, to protect his friends at home. But what about Rapunzel? He knew it was selfish of him, but he couldn't just leave her here. But he couldn't exactly bring her back with him, as her responsibility lied here in Corona. It was something that he didn't like to think about, but he knew that he was going to have to make some kind of decision if it came down to it. He just hoped that he'd know what to do if that time comes. Thank you for joining us on this journey through What If Deku Was Sent 500 Years in Past. We hope you found it as captivating as we did. A big thank you to Nick Foolery for creating such an engaging story. Don't forget to visit their profile on fanfiction.net for more fantastic works. The link is in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Zen and Fanfics for more intriguing explorations into fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we love hearing your thoughts and suggestions in the comment section. See you soon in the next video.